Chapter 40. Chu Mu's life was very regular. He would wake up early in the morning to practice the Zhongyuan Sword Qi observation technique and the Sword Qi protection secret technique. Then he would go to the wind sword platform to practice his swordsmanship. After returning, he would enter the pond to practice his swordsmanship. At night, he would comprehend the sword momentum. Ever since he was defeated by Chu Mu after using his full strength, Han Rui refused to fight with Chu Mu again. It was too hurtful. That feeling was too sullen. He didn't want to experience it a second time, or else it would leave a shadow in his heart. Senior brother, tomorrow is the time for you to go to the life and death sword platform. Li Wei's little face was full of worry. In the past few days, Chu Mu had taught her swordsmanship from time to time. Now, the flying cloud sword technique was close to Deshang, and the wind sword technique was about to be mastered. Such progress was worth at least several months of hard work. This made her extremely grateful to Chu Mu. "Don't worry," Chu Mu said lightly and went to the second floor. He had mastered the Qi observation technique. The wind sword technique was also Deshang's, and the sword Qi protection secret technique. He had made slight progress, but he didn't know when he would be able to break through to the second layer. The progress of the sword Qi cultivation was undetectable. Chu Mu couldn't help but sigh at the disadvantages of having a low cultivation talent and no medicinal pills. As for the sword momentum, there was still no breakthrough. The night passed. At dawn the next day, Chu Mu woke up. After washing up, he began to cultivate. He didn't feel nervous or anxious because of the upcoming life and death sword battle. Draped in a deep chill, he came to the high wind sword platform to practice his sword arts. "I really don't know what to say." Not long after, Han Rui also appeared. Seeing Chu Mu practicing his swordsmanship, he smiled bitterly and said, "Wait, it's time for you and Wang Feng to fight to the death. I don't feel the slightest tension from you. It seems that you are really confident about the life and death sword battle. Do you want to go and see?" Chu Mu asked in a very natural tone. "Go, I want to see how you'll defeat Wang Feng." Unconsciously, a thought emerged in his mind. This thought had been growing in his mind ever since he had used his full strength and lost. That thought was that perhaps Chu Mu could defeat Wang Feng. "And then take me there. I don't know where the life and death sword discourse arena is," Chu Mu said, almost causing Han Rui to fall. "Let's go. I'll take you there now." Han Rui smiled bitterly. At that moment, many inner disciples appeared and strode over. Among them were Qi Bai, Zhuang Qiuxing, and the others. "Isn't that Chu Mu? What, are you planning to run away?" Qi Bai laughed as much as possible. "Let me tell you, you won't be able to escape. You should obediently go to the life and death arena. Today will be your last day in this world, ha 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 ha, scram." Looking at Qi Bai with an indifferent gaze, Chu Mu coldly spat out a word, causing Qi Bai's laughter to stop abruptly. It was as if he had swallowed a fat maggot. His face became extremely ugly, and his eyes revealed an ominous glint. "Arrogant, you can be arrogant. You can only be arrogant now," Qi Bai said fiercely. Because it was a life and death sword battle, the inner disciples of the three courtyards all woke up earlier than usual. Furthermore, they did not cultivate. After washing up, they set off in groups towards the life and death arena. The life and death arena was not within the three courtyards, but not far behind the law enforcement hall. It was a half-meter tall platform made of polished gray rock, 10 meters long and 10 meters wide. The surroundings were also flat gray rock, and the area was very large. It could accommodate hundreds of people at the same time without being crowded. At this moment, Wang Feng was standing on the sword discourse arena with his eyes closed. He held the sword in his left hand and crossed his arms in front of his chest. He was motionless, like a statue. One after another, people rushed over and surrounded the sword discourse arena. They were about 5 meters away from the edge of the sword discourse arena. Wang Feng is already here. It seems like he can't wait any longer." Where's that Chu Mu? He's not here yet. Could it be that he doesn't dare to come? A mere new inner disciple. He thinks that he can be arrogant in the inner sect just because he has some fame in the outer sect. Senior brother Wang Feng will let him know the difference between us. This was what a 7th-level Sword Chi realm disciple from the Thunder Courtyard said. You're wrong. He won't have the chance to know the difference between us. Because in the life and death arena, it doesn't matter if you win or lose. It's only life and death. Either you die or I live. Another disciple from the Thunder Courtyard sneered. This new inner sect disciple called Chu Mu, I don't know if his brain has been damaged from sword training, but he unexpectedly agreed to Wang Feng's life and death sword fight. I think he's just looking for his own death. This was said by an inner sect disciple from Jadewater Academy. Who knows? Maybe he overestimated his own strength and thought that he could run rampant in the inner sect just because he obtained the title of number 1 outer disciple. How sad! The Towering Wind Courtyard actually produced such an overconfident person. Fortunately, he didn't choose our Jadewater Courtyard. Otherwise, our Jadewater Courtyard would have lost a lot of face. Look, the people from the Towering Wind Courtyard are here. Everyone looked over and saw a group of about 30 people striding over. They were the inner disciples of the Towering Wind Courtyard. Chu Mu was also among them. He was walking leisurely at the back with Han Rui. As if he had also heard this, Wang Feng's eyes suddenly opened. A trace of lightning flickered as he looked at the disciples of the Towering Wind Courtyard. Looking past them, he directly stared at Chu Mu. A vicious resentment shot out like a sharp sword, as if he wanted to shoot Chu Mu to death. He clenched his fists so hard that blue veins popped out. Everyone felt a sharp killing intent erupting from Wang Feng's body. They were all startled. At the same time, the law enforcement elder and the elders of the 3 courtyards came together and sat on the 4 mahogany chairs that had been prepared earlier. Coincidentally, the 4 elders were located on the east side of the Sword Discourse Arena, while the inner disciples of the 3 courtyards were located on the south, west, and north side. As for the law enforcement disciples, Lu Shui and Yenling, they stood on the left and right sides of the law enforcement elder. Without saying a word, Chu Mu slowly walked towards the Sword Discourse Arena. With a light leap, he was 5 meters away from Wang Feng, facing him from afar. His expression was indifferent and calm. Wang Feng's eyes were filled with resentment, and the killing intent that was constantly emitting from him did not affect him in the slightest. It has been 5 years since a life and death sword battle has occurred in our sect. This is also the first time in 5 years that this elder has presided over a life and death sword battle. On one side is the veteran inner disciple of the Thunder Courtyard, Wang Feng. On the other side is the new inner disciple of the Towering Wind Courtyard, Chu Mu. As the law enforcement elder of the Sword Sect, this elder sincerely hopes that the 2 sides can resolve the conflict in a more gentle way. No matter which side lives or dies, it will be a loss for our sect. The law enforcement elder stood up and said in a deep voice with a pure aura, "Here, this elder will ask again. Are both of you willing to resolve the conflict in other ways?" Many thanks to the law enforcement elder. I insist on a life and death sword battle. Wang Feng said, staring at Chu Mu with red eyes. Many thanks for the good intentions of the law enforcement elder. Chu Mu appreciates it. Chu Mu turned towards the law enforcement elder and saluted with his sword. Even if Wang Feng was willing, Chu Mu wouldn't agree. Wang Feng was a narrow-minded person who would seek revenge for the slightest grievance. Moreover, he was a bit scheming. Once he was given the slightest chance, he would definitely not let go. To Chu Mu, Wang Feng was only qualified to be a stumbling block. As for Wang Feng, his hatred for Chu Mu was extremely deep. He wanted to kill Chu Mu, so it was even more impossible for him to agree to the law enforcement elder's suggestion. Since both sides insist on a life and death sword battle, this elder will not stop them. The law enforcement elder was expressionless, but there was a sense of majesty between his brows. The life and death sword battle on the sword arena of life and death will depend on one's cultivation and sword skills. It does not matter who wins or loses, only life and death. However, this elder still hopes that the other side will not be killed if possible. Both sides are ready. This elder announces that the life and death sword battle begins. As soon as the law enforcement elder announced the start of the battle, the atmosphere immediately became tense. A desolate, killing intent swept out like a cold wind, causing everyone to involuntarily tremble and subconsciously shrink their neck. With two clangs, Chu Mu and Wang Feng unsheathed their swords at the same time. Book ID equals 226-4207. Book name equals Gods Destroying the Nine Heavens. Chapter 41. The ear-piercing sound was still echoing in everyone's ears, but the murderous aura was already surging. The sword chi was released, and a faint purple sword chi shot through the air. The crackling sound made everyone's scalp tingle. The snow sword light was like a waterfall, piercing through the sky. It was followed by the sword chi, which was extremely destructive. So fast! So powerful! This sword chi is so terrifying! Wang Feng's sword chi has already reached the peak of the 8th phase. He's only one step away from reaching the 9th phase. The elder of the Thunder Martial Hall nodded and said with a smile. The other 3 elders also nodded. Yan Ling and Lu Shui's faces were solemn. Wang Feng's attack was enough to make them feel threatened. This Chu Mu is dead for sure this time. Lu Shui thought to herself. Yan Ling couldn't help but shake his head in pity. The inner disciples of the Thunder Martial Hall were all excited. As for the inner disciples of the Soaring Wind Martial Hall, other than Qi Bai who was gloating, the others were all worried and frowned. Wang Feng's strength is beyond our expectations. Han Rui thought. He was very worried. Chu Mu's pupils instantly shrunk to the size of needles. With chaotic steps and wind-swinging willow, afterimages appeared one after another. His footsteps were messy as he quickly dodged. The clear difference in cultivation made Chu Mu realize that going head-to-head with Wang Feng wasn't the right thing to do. The eyes of the law enforcement elder and the others lit up. This new inner sect disciple called Chu Mu is using the wind-swinging willow movement technique and chaotic steps, right? Unexpectedly, he has cultivated them to the perfect stage. Moreover, he is able to perfectly combine them. He truly isn't simple. The discipline elder nodded his head and said softly. It wasn't hard to reach the small success stage of a cultivation technique. Deshang needed time to reach the small success stage. Not only that, but it also required enough comprehension. If one didn't have enough comprehension, they would be stuck at the Deshang level. This won't do. When the outcome is clear, I must stop them. Both of them are geniuses, the law enforcement elder thought to himself. The light purple sword chi slashed through the air and flew out of the sword discourse arena. About 10 meters away, it naturally dissipated, turning into countless tiny electric arcs that jumped in the air and disappeared. Wang Feng's sword style changed, and was already wrapped in a layer of light purple electric arcs as he charged towards Chu Mu. Chu Mu's dodging speed was fast, but so was Wang Feng's sword. It was extremely sharp and domineering. What he used was the basic move of an intermediate thunder swordsmanship. It's here. Senior brother Wang Feng is using the Thunderbolt sword art. Chu Mu is dead for sure. The inner sect disciples' eyes lit up. Wang Feng's Thunderbolt sword art is already a level higher than Deshang's. Even I am not his opponent. A peak 8th phase inner sect disciple's expression slightly changed as he muttered to himself. Zhongyuan's sword chi filled the 100 refinements sword. Chu Mu quickly moved his feet, seemingly without any pattern. Although Wang Feng's sword was fast and ferocious like lightning, it was unable to hit Chu Mu. Thunder light step. Wang Feng's expression was sinister as he growled. Countless sparks seemed to shoot out from his feet. Stepping on the sparks, Wang Feng's speed suddenly increased a lot. His sword was like lightning as it pierced towards Chu Mu. He wouldn't stop until he was dead. Their speed is so fast and so nimble. The inner sect disciples of the three academies could only see two figures on the sword discourse arena. One was like a willow swaying in the wind, leaving behind layers of afterimages. The other was like a bolt of lightning, directly exploding and dazzling. This damn Chu Mu. He actually has such an exquisite movement technique. Chi Bai's expression was gloomy as he cursed inwardly. Soon after, he laughed sinisterly. However, in front of such a huge difference in cultivation, this is nothing but a deathbed struggle. Zhuang Qiusheng's mouth was wide open. Originally, he was very sullen and unconvinced after losing to Chu Mu. He felt that it was because he had suppressed his cultivation. But now, after seeing Chu Mu's movement technique and thinking back to his own passive state during the sword battle, he knew that he was not Chu Mu's opponent. His heart was dejected. Wang Feng's sword chi art is of the lightning attribute, and his sword art is also of the lightning attribute. They complement each other. Chu Mu used the chaotic steps and the willow swaying in the wind to the extreme. The sword vision also played a great role. Wang Feng's sword was clearly seen by Chu Mu. The lightning attribute sword art is originally extremely fast, not at all inferior to the wind attribute. Moreover, it is extremely powerful, surpassing the wind attribute. It is more direct and violent. Although my sword art is above Wang Feng's, the difference in sword chi cultivation is too great. Especially now that Wang Feng is full of anger and is attacking fiercely, I have to wait until Wang Feng is slightly discouraged and find a chance to counterattack. The sword vision not only allowed Chu Mu to see the opponent's sword trajectory clearly, but also allowed him to see the flaws. He was now waiting for the moment when Wang Feng's momentum was slightly discouraged. That would be the beginning of Chu Mu's counterattack. The Thunderbolt sword art was famous for its speed. Combined with the Thunder Light steps, Wang Feng's sword was not only fast, but also at tricky angles. However, Chu Mu kept dodging. Chu Mu seemed to have the ability to predict. Every time Wang Feng attacked, Chu Mu would have already moved and dodged, causing Wang Feng's sword to miss. Wang Feng's furious attacks could not do anything to Chu Mu, but it made the inner disciples of the three academies hold their breaths. Their eyes were wide open, and their hands unconsciously clenched. Their hearts were in their throat. As for Wang Feng, he had vented out a lot of his anger and gradually calmed down. He knew that if he continued to attack fiercely, he would run out of energy sooner or later, which would be disadvantageous for him. All of a sudden, Wang Feng changed his sword movement. The sword he stabbed out became very strange. The light purple sword chi on it fluctuated violently, constantly clashing against each other. A huge rumbling sound was heard all of a sudden, as if thunder was rolling and exploding right next to their ears. Even the inner disciples of the three academies felt their ears buzzing and their heads buzzing. It was indeed the Thunder Academy's signature sword attack, the Thunder Explosion. Chu Mu bore the brunt of the attack, but his soul was powerful. He only felt a buzzing sound in his ears and a bit of pain. However, he did not feel any dizziness. Instead, he took the opportunity and threw out his sword. A cool breeze blew over, containing a cold, killing intent. It made Wang Feng's expression change. His sword was like a lightning bolt. One beam of killing intent split into 8 beams, bypassing the sharp lightning bolt and shooting toward Wang Feng. It seemed like it was going to cut him into pieces. Wang Feng's eyelids twitched. He hurriedly changed his sword movement, and a beam of lightning exploded, rushing toward Chu Mu. Thunderous light explosion! Wang Feng yelled. The dazzling cool breeze collided with the thunderbolt explosion. 8 consecutive explosions rang out, shaking heaven and earth. It was even louder than thunder, almost deafening people. They couldn't help but cover their ears. Moreover, the light was so intense that people couldn't help but squint their eyes. Only the 4 elders were unaffected. Chu Mu and Wang Feng both showed a trace of pain on their faces. They quickly backed off, dodging the sword qi. Just now. What happened? This new inner disciple was actually able to tie with senior brother Wang Feng? The inner disciples of the Thunder Academy opened their mouths wide in shock. Impossible! Senior brother Wang Feng had not used his mid-rank killer move yet. Once he did, this new inner disciple would be dead for sure. But, the sword art that this new inner disciple used seemed to be the Cool Breeze sword art. It is also a mid-rank sword art. So what if it's a mid-rank sword art? Do you think a new inner disciple can learn a mid-rank killer move? Moreover, even if he did, how could he be compared with senior brother Wang Feng? You have to know that senior brother Wang Feng has already given the thunderous sword art to Dishang. Who would have thought that Chu Mu could actually fight with Wang Feng to such an intense degree? Han Rui murmured. The hearts of the inner disciples of the Thunder Academy were beating like drums. In fact, the majority of them still hoped that Chu Mu could win, although the chances were slim. The four elders looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Obviously, Chu Mu's performance was out of their expectations. No matter if it was his movement technique or sword art, they were not something an ordinary rank 7 disciple could achieve. Who would have thought that such a talent would appear in our Thunder Academy? The elder of the Thunder Academy smiled. So what? A talent will become a dead talent on the life and death arena. The elder of the Thunder Academy retorted. It's not certain who will live and who will die. The elder of the Thunder Academy immediately retorted. All right, there's no need to argue. Continue watching and you'll know. The law enforcement elder said. The elders of the Thunder Academy and the Thunder Academy looked at each other and snorted coldly. They turned their heads and looked at the two people on the sword discourse arena, no longer speaking. Chu Mu's strength made Wang Feng extremely fearful. One had to know that his sword qi cultivation was far superior to Chu Mu's. Under such a gap, he was actually unable to gain the upper hand. Wang Feng could feel that Chu Mu's sword qi was far inferior to his in terms of quality and quantity. However, Chu Mu's sword cultivation was extremely shocking, completely surpassing his. It was precisely because of Chu Mu's exquisite sword cultivation that he was not at a disadvantage. In an instant, Wang Feng made a decision. He waved his sword, and in the blink of an eye, he slashed out a few times. Crackling sounds rang out, causing one's scalp to go numb. 4 light purple sword qi intersected, like 4 streaks of lightning streaking across the sky, rushing towards Chu Mu. Immediately after, on the surface of Wang Feng's body, dense light purple electric arcs strangely appeared, jumping crazily and rushing towards the sword. A heart-palpitating qi spread out, causing everyone's heart to jump again. They all knew that Wang Feng was about to use his true killing move. Rapid thunder lightning kill. Abruptly letting out a low roar, Wang Feng seemed to become one with the 100 refined sword in his hand, transforming into an incomparably sharp, dazzling, tyrannical, and dazzling lightning bolt that shot out in a perfectly straight line. Its speed was extremely fast, almost arriving first even though it was launched later. It caught up with the 4 sharp sword auras that were released and attacked Chu Mu. Chu Mu did not seem to be doing anything. He only waved his sword out like a normal attack, but it made the eyes of the 4 elders brighten. This was clearly the performance of returning to one's natural state. Even they could not do it, so how could it appear on a newly promoted inner disciple? Chu Mu had used the mysteries of clouds to perform the shocking cloud kill, increasing its power by a lot. Countless clouds gathered together, and a soft white cloud shot out. It kept spinning and collided with Wang Feng's dazzling electric arcs. In an instant, the white cloud exploded, and countless sword qi shot out in all directions. The electric arcs were weakened and turned into light purple electric arcs that were attached to the white cloud sword qi. The air was filled with crackling sounds that made one's scalp go numb. The sword qi was too fast and too fierce. Chu Mu hurried to back out, but some of the sword chi still managed to cut open his long robe. The sword chi protective secret art was activated in time, blocking out the remaining sword chi and preventing him from getting hurt. On the other hand, Wang Feng's robe had been torn into strips. Without the protection of the sword chi, many small wounds appeared on his skin. Through the gaps in the sword aura, Chu Mu saw Wang Feng continuously retreat to dodge the sword aura. He immediately slashed out with his sword, causing a cool breeze to blow. His killing intent was awe-inspiring. A light cyan wind blade, nearly a meter long, left the sword aura and flew towards Wang Feng. Impossible! Wang Feng's pupils shrank and his face was full of shock. He hurriedly waved his sword and released his sword chi. At the same time, he performed the thunder light steps to dodge to the side. However, the clear wind kill was even faster and more powerful under the mysteries of the wind. It shattered the sword chi and a blood light appeared. Blood splashed everywhere, and a severed arm flew into the air. Chapter 42. What? The four elders suddenly stood up, their eyes wide open. They completely lost their composure. The scene in front of them was unbelievable. Impossible! This doesn't make sense. The inner disciples of the three academies sucked in a breath of cold air and rubbed their eyes. When they looked carefully again, they couldn't believe it. Wang Feng's left arm was cut off and flew high into the air. A line of blood splashed across the sky. The severed arm flew far away and landed below the sword discourse arena. The 5 fingers were slightly bent and twitching, as if they wanted to take one's life. Especially the inner disciples of the Thunder Academy. They couldn't believe that their senior brother Wang Feng's left arm was cut off. From the top to the bottom of the sword discourse arena, there was a stream of blood splattering everywhere. It was a shocking sight. Wang Feng fell to the side, his face full of pain. The muscles on his severed arm wriggled and blood spurted out like a sword. His right hand tightly grasped the 100 refined sword and glared at Chu Mu with hatred. He clenched his teeth and didn't let out any painful groans. The veins on his forehead bulged and the hatred in his eyes was like a sword. It was as if he wanted to kill Chu Mu with his gaze. The entire place was silent. It was so quiet that even the sound of a needle falling could be heard clearly. Unbelievable! Unbelievable! Han Rui's eyes were lifeless. He muttered to himself in a voice that even he couldn't hear. Impossible! This is simply impossible! I'm dreaming, I must be dreaming. Chi Bai was also muttering to himself, his face pale and green. If this was true, it meant that Chu Mu had the strength to kill a peak 8th phase cultivator. Only 9th phase swordsmen could defeat Chu Mu. The significance of this was completely different. The difference in strength between stage 8 and stage 9 was obvious, and the difference in status was also very obvious. In the inner sect, disciples who had reached stage 9 had another title, Elite Disciple. Elite disciples didn't belong to the 3 academies. They belonged to the Green Peak main palace. In other words, once a disciple of the 3 academies broke through to 9th phase, they would become an elite disciple of the main palace. Zhuang Qiusheng's face was ashen. He had completely given up. He knew that he was no match for Chu Mu. Among the inner disciples of the High Wind Courtyard, there was one person whose face was filled with disbelief and bitterness. He was Li Yang. They were both at the early stage of the 7th stage of the Sword Qi realm, but Chu Mu was already able to defeat someone at the peak of the 8th stage of the Sword Qi realm. On the other hand, when he fought a senior brother at the middle stage of the 7th stage of the Sword Qi realm from the Towering Wind Institution, he was barely able to stay undefeated. This was the real gap. When he took the important step, he realized that the person he thought he could surpass was only a distant back view. Chu Mu stood on the sword discourse platform, his body as straight as a sword, pointing straight at the sky. His expression was indifferent as he looked straight at Wang Feng, without the slightest bit of pity, without the slightest bit of pity. Immediately after, Chu Mu raised his sword, and the hearts of the inner sect disciples rose to their throats. None of them could breathe as they stared at Chu Mu without blinking, waiting for the moment of life and death. Stop! At the most critical moment, the elder of the Thunder Courtyard shouted, Chu Mu, you have already won and proved to the 3 courtyards that you are stronger than Wang Feng. There is no need to kill him. You must know that when it is possible to make mistakes, one should be lenient. Immediately, everyone's gaze fell on Chu Mu, waiting to see what choice Chu Mu would make. This was the elder of the Thunder Courtyard. He held great power and his cultivation was extremely high. He had long surpassed the Sword Qi realm. Even if he could not directly control Chu Mu, once he offended him, it would be easy for him to make things difficult for Chu Mu. Therefore, the inner disciples of the 3 courtyards all felt that if it were them, they would choose not to kill Wang Feng. It was unwise to offend an elder for this. They felt that Chu Mu should be the same as them, unwilling to offend an elder. Wang Feng stared at Chu Mu with hatred. In his heart, he hoped that Chu Mu would not kill him. As long as he could survive, he could find another opportunity to kill Chu Mu. He had to kill Chu Mu no matter what. Elder, in the life and death arena, it doesn't matter if you win or lose, only life and death. It was Wang Feng who first proposed the life and death arena. It is not to prove who is stronger, but to settle the grudge and kill me. Chu Mu was neither slow nor fast, neither servile nor overbearing as he said, swords are lethal weapons, sword techniques are killing techniques. This is the philosophy that I have always adhered to. I am a swordsman, and I must kill Wang Feng. I hope you can understand. Although Chu Mu did not agree with the elder of the Thunder Courtyard, his words were not too harsh. He did not embarrass the elder of the Thunder Courtyard. Although the elder was unhappy, he did not feel that he had lost face. Instead, he was surprised by Chu Mu's words, the sword is a weapon, and the swordsmanship is the art of killing. Not only him, the other 3 elders and the inner disciples all trembled when they heard this. They only felt that this sentence explained the true meaning of a swordsman's sword practice. Without saying a word, the elder of the Thunder Courtyard sat back down with a cold face. The meaning was clear. He would not stop Wang Feng. The law enforcement elder thought for a while and did not say anything. Wang Feng's heart sank. He clenched his teeth and slammed his sword on the ground with his right hand. He flew up with great force. Sword Qi surged and rushed toward the 100 refined sword. With a fierce slash, a faint purple sword Qi slashed toward Chu Mu. Moreover, it rushed toward Chu Mu in an attempt to launch a desperate counterattack. However, as he had lost an arm, he could not maintain his balance. The sword Qi was easily dodged by Chu Mu. The trajectory of the sword was even clearer in Chu Mu's eyes. Chu Mu's footsteps were messy. His body swayed like a willow. His speed was extremely fast, leaving behind many afterimages. He quickly approached Wang Feng with a cold killing intent. The snow-white sword light was like a rainbow piercing through the sky. With a qi-la sound, Chu Mu's figure passed by Wang Feng. Wang Feng's lips moved, but he couldn't make any sound. His eyes were wide open, full of resentment and unwillingness. A wound appeared on his neck and blood spurted out like a fountain. The inner disciples of the 3 courtyards opened their eyes wide again. They felt like their throats were being strangled by an invisible hand. They could not make a sound. Their eyes reflected Wang Feng's figure as he slowly fell backwards. With a bang, dust flew up and the 100 refinements sword fell with a clang and rolled to the side. Life and death sword arena, regardless of victory or defeat, only life and death. In this battle, Wang Feng died. After a long time, the law enforcement elder sighed and said in a heavy tone, "As the law enforcement elder of our sect, I sincerely hope that the disciples of our sect can unite and live in harmony. There can be competition between us, but we cannot bully others and we cannot plot against them. Everything has to be based on the strength of our own sect and the strength of our sect. If there are any conflicts, try to resolve them peacefully. The law enforcement elder's words were like the conclusion of this life and death battle. Soon after, the 4 elders stood up and left, but their hearts were still shaken. When the elder of the Soaring Wind Institute left, he specially took a few more glances at Chu Mu. The more he looked, the more satisfied he was. Chu Mu stepped over Wang Feng's corpse and walked down the sword arena. The disciples of the Soaring Wind Institute consciously made way for Chu Mu as if they were welcoming a king. They were all silent as they looked at Chu Mu with eyes full of reverence. Only Chi Bai's gaze was very complicated. There was anger, unwillingness, worry, and so on, but there was no reverence. Gradually, Chu Mu walked away. The inner disciples of the 3 academies all looked at Chu Mu's back as he slowly walked away. From his straight figure they felt a kind of pride, a kind of sharpness, 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 a kind of sword-like sharpness, a kind of sharpness, a kind of sharpness, a kind of sharpness, a kind of sword-like 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 sharpness, a kind they couldn't help but think that Chu Mu would shake the entire inner sect and the sword school. As for Wang Feng, he was already dead. All of his achievements were scattered with the wind, and all of his glory was destroyed, buried in dust. Chapter 43. The sword is a weapon. Swordsmanship is a killing technique. These words were spread around the 3 inner courtyards. Every disciple, elder, and elder knew about it. Even the main hall and the outer disciples had heard about it. The sword is a weapon, swordsmanship is a killing technique. Concise and perfect explanation. The elder of the sword pavilion repeated it and smiled as he muttered to himself, "This Chu Mu really surprises me." The inner disciples of the 3 courtyards also firmly remembered this sentence. Maybe they couldn't understand the profoundness of it, but they felt that this sentence was very imposing and had a kind of peerless edge. Because of this, many inner disciples kept saying this sentence. Some inner disciples even said this sentence before they practiced swordsmanship. It seemed to make them look more imposing and more focused when practicing swordsmanship. In the 91st pavilion of the Towering Wind Courtyard, Li Wei brought the fragrant dishes to the balcony on the 2nd floor for Chu Mu to eat. Li Wei's big eyes were filled with admiration and admiration. "Senior brother, the sword is a weapon, swordsmanship is a killing technique." This sentence, the more it is repeated, the more interesting it is. It seems to contain a great principle. Li Wei stuck out her tongue and said excitedly, "Also, everyone outside is saying that senior brother is the best swordsman in the 3 inner courtyards. Only senior brother Shao Qianfeng of our Towering Wind Courtyard can compare with you." When Chu Mu heard this, he only smiled and didn't care. He didn't care about titles like Best Swordsmanship or Best Inner Disciple. Those were just false titles. False titles would only bring him unnecessary trouble. Only swordsmanship and swordsmanship were true. He didn't know that right now, the 3 inner courtyards were having an intense debate about whether or not Chu Mu's title of number 1 sword artist in the 3 inner courtyards was true. Some believed that it was true, and some believed that it was absolutely true, while some believed that it wasn't true. This was because each of the 3 academies originally had the most powerful disciple. Originally, the most powerful disciple of the Soaring Wind Courtyard was Shao Qianfeng, who was at the 8th stage of the Sword Qi realm. His sword techniques alone were unrivaled in the Soaring Wind Courtyard. As for the Rumbling Thunder Courtyard and the Jade Water Courtyard, they each had a disciple at the peak of the 8th stage, whose sword techniques were astonishing. That's right, senior brother Shao Qianfeng and the others are indeed extremely formidable. However, do all of you think that they would be able to kill Deshang, who is at the peak of the 8th level, and has mastered an intermediate sword art, with a cultivation at the early stage of the 7th level of the sword chi realm, and without being injured? When this question was asked, everyone became silent. Even the loyal supporters of Xiao Qianfeng and the others didn't dare to say that Xiao Qianfeng and the others had such a battle record. It had to be known that the early stage of the 8th phase sword chi cultivation was 2 times that of the early stage of the 7th phase, and the peak of the 8th phase was 3 times that of the early stage of the 7th phase. Adding on the purity of the sword chi, the difference was even greater. What kind of swordsmanship? Was that why he was able to ignore the difference in cultivation level and kill powerful enemies without getting injured? Only Chu Mu could do it. Don't be too complacent. When senior brother he returns, he will naturally seek justice from Chu Mu. This was the voice of some of the disciples of the Thunder Academy. You are Chu Mu. As expected, you are extraordinary. The eyes of the High Wind Palm Academy flowed with a sharp light, like a treasured sword. It landed on Chu Mu's body, causing Chu Mu to feel a trace of piercing pain. It was as if countless small and sharp swords were cutting into his skin. Even the sword chi protecting his body was unable to do anything. The Lingfeng sect master was a tall middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s. He had a slender figure and had the look of a modest gentleman. He was dressed in a green robe which made him look even more elegant. He was a distinguished person. After dinner, Chu Mu was sitting on the balcony to rest. A deacon came and said that the High Wind Palm Academy had summoned him. Chu Mu followed and saw the High Wind Palm Academy, which was the highest authority of the High Wind Academy. As soon as they met, Chu Mu first saluted with his sword, but the High Wind Palm Academy didn't say a word. They had been sizing up Chu Mu the entire time. Only now did they say a word. The sword is a murderous weapon, and the swordsmanship is a killing technique. After reciting it in a low voice, the eyes of the High Wind Palm Academy became even brighter and sharper. Where did you hear this from? It was passed down by my master. Chu Mu said. Your master? You already have a master. There was a trace of disappointment in the High Wind Palm Academy's words, but it quickly disappeared. Your master must be a swordsman with extremely high attainments in swordsmanship. I wonder what his name is? Academy Master. My master is known as a sword master. He is not in this world. As for his name, he has never mentioned it. Chu Mu said. Yes, it's a pity that I can't meet such a strange person. A sword master, what kind of glory and attainment is that? The High Wind Palm Academy sighed. He didn't know that Chu Mu, who was in front of him, was a sword grandmaster. In terms of swordsmanship, even he couldn't compare to him. I didn't ask you to come here for a big matter. It's just that your reputation is resounding now and you are also a disciple of my High Wind Academy, so I specially came to take a look. The High Wind Palm Academy explained with a smile. Right now, the 3 academies are spreading the news that you are the #1 swordsman in the 3 academies. Elder Lin also saw with his own eyes that you used your exquisite swordsmanship to make up for the gap in cultivation. In the end, with your cultivation at the early stage of the 7th stage, you killed Wang Feng, who was at the peak of the 8th stage. I am very curious about this. After the Academy Master saw me, did you feel that I was worthy of my name? Chu Mu wasn't afraid at all and smiled. You're very confident. The High Wind Palm Academy shook his head and smiled. What I have seen now is indeed not bad and extraordinary. However, I still need to verify it. Make your move and use your full strength. If you can shock me, I will give you an opportunity. When Chu Mu heard this, he couldn't help but think of the sword force that the Sword Pavilion Elder had taught him. Perhaps, without the guidance of the Sword Pavilion Elder, it was only a matter of time for Chu Mu to comprehend the sword force. However, without the guidance there was a clear difference. At the very least, Chu Mu now had a clear goal and knew how to move forward. He wasn't at a loss and fumbling around. Chu Mu no longer hesitated and unsheathed his sword. He used the basic move of the clear wind sword technique, and his sword was like a clear wind. Clear wind sword technique, not bad. The High Wind Palm Academy smiled and didn't move, allowing Chu Mu to attack. Chu Mu also knew that the High Wind Palm Academy was definitely an expert in the Qi transformation realm. Even if he used his full strength, he wouldn't be able to hurt the High Wind Palm Academy at all. Thus, he didn't hold back and used the 3 killing moves of the Clear Wind sword technique. The High Wind Palm Academy still didn't move. The 3 killing moves of the Clear Wind sword technique couldn't do anything to him. Not bad, the Clear Wind sword technique has reached perfection. You have surprised me even more. You are worthy of the title of number 1 sword disciple of the 3 academies. However, it's still not enough to shock me. The High Wind Palm Academy smiled. He didn't even move his hair. Do you have any more powerful moves? More powerful moves? Of course. During the battle with Wang Feng, Chu Mu didn't use external sword qi. Now, he didn't plan to use it. However, the Clear Wind sword technique didn't incorporate the mysteries of the wind. I still have one move, said Chu Mu. Shortly after, he entered a special state. The 100 refinement sword slashed through the air, and a gust of wind abruptly arose. A light cyan color condensed and transformed into a nearly meter-long wind blade that slashed out. The High Wind Palm Academy's eyes widened. They were filled with shock and disbelief. His expression was extremely excited. His lips trembled slightly. He stared at Chu Mu as if he had discovered a rare treasure. The Clear Wind killing move was shattered. The High Wind Palm Academy flashed and appeared beside Chu Mu like a ghost. This gave Chu Mu a fright, especially the High Wind Palm Academy's eyes. They were shining like a miser who had seen a pile of gold. Wind. Concept of wind. You actually comprehended the concept of wind. The High Wind Palm Academy was so excited that he couldn't control himself. After a long time, the High Wind Palm Academy slowly calmed down. However, he was still very shocked. It's hard to believe that you actually comprehended the concept of wind. Although it's not even 10%, but this is simply like a dream. The High Wind Palm Academy muttered to himself. Chu Mu didn't say a word. He vaguely guessed that some of the mysteries of the wind that he had comprehended might be the so-called concept of wind. Come, tell me, how did you comprehend the concept of wind? The High Wind Palm Academy said to Chu Mu. His attitude was much gentler and more intimate than before. As for Chu Mu, he was also very curious about this mystery. Since the High Wind Palm Academy could see it with a glance, it meant that he was more familiar with it. It just so happened that he could solve his doubts. The two sides hit it off and began to discuss. Chapter 44. Concept of Wind. It seems that I have unknowingly comprehended not only the concept of wind, but also the concept of cloud. After leaving the pavilion, Chu Mu pondered as he walked. From the Soaring Wind Academy, Chu Mu had a clearer understanding of concepts and his own perception of how much he had comprehended them. 3,000 concepts. This was what the Soaring Wind Academy had said. It meant that there were 3,000 types of concepts just like the 3,000 great worlds. Everything one saw, everything one heard, and everything one could feel could all be considered as a concept. I have already comprehended 10% of the concept of wind. As for the concept of clouds, it is less than 10% but more than 5%. Chu Mu told the Soaring Wind Academy about the circumstances under which he had comprehended the concept, causing the Soaring Wind Academy to be shocked once again. Cultivating an intermediate sword technique actually allowed him to comprehend a concept? It was hard to believe. A Qi transformation realm expert like the Soaring Wind Academy was very clear on one point. The higher the level of the sword technique, the easier it was to comprehend a concept. Simply put, sword techniques were the process of transforming the formless concept into something that could be cultivated. Cultivating sword techniques was not only about comprehending the sword, but also about comprehending a concept. However, beginner, intermediate, and advanced sword arts were relatively simple and did not contain any conception. Therefore, it was almost impossible to comprehend a conception. Only after reaching the transcendent sword technique would it begin to contain a trace of a concept. However, wanting to comprehend a concept from a transcendent sword technique was incomparably difficult. It was almost impossible, unless one's comprehension was close to monstrous. However, Chu Mu had managed to comprehend a concept from an intermediate sword technique. It was the first time that he had completely cultivated it. Any sword cultivator who had comprehended a concept would find it inconceivable. The Soaring Wind Academy was incomparably shocked. Chu Mu's comprehension was too terrifying. After being excited, the Soaring Wind Academy believed that he did not have the qualifications to accept Chu Mu as a disciple, so he gave up on that thought. Instead, he told Chu Mu about the process of his comprehension of the concept of wind, as well as his various experiences. This allowed Chu Mu's concept of wind to stabilize from its original 10%. Chu Mu didn't tell the High Wind Academy that other than the concept of wind, he had also comprehended the concept of clouds. Otherwise, he didn't know how shocked he would be. This was because one thing was certain. After comprehending a concept, the difficulty of comprehending a second or third concept would continuously increase. Although I have comprehended the concept, it is very difficult to improve on it. According to what the sect master said, he has been comprehending the concept for over 10 years and has only comprehended 30%. Chu Mu muttered to himself, the monastery master comprehended the concept of wind at the severe gale cliff. According to him, the severe gale cliff will help me comprehend the concept of wind. Since that's the case, I should make a trip to the severe gale cliff. However, the severe gale cliff is used by the sword faction to punish disciples who have made mistakes. Normally, I can't enter. Chu Mu was a bit vexed. He wanted to enter the severe gale cliff, but disciples who didn't make mistakes couldn't enter. Therefore, he had to make a mistake. Moreover, this mistake had to be just right. If it was too serious, he would be expelled. If it was too light, he would only be warned. Logically speaking, since the Soaring Wind Academy had mentioned this point, there should be a way to help Chu Mu enter the severe gale cliff. For example, if he went to talk to the law-enforcing elder, it might be possible. However, he didn't do so. This showed that he wasn't willing, no matter what his thoughts were. Therefore, Chu Mu had to think of a way himself. He began to recall the rules of the inner sect that he had seen before and gradually had an idea in his heart. At this moment, Chu Mu felt a figure flash in front of him. When he looked over, he saw Chi Bai's figure. Chi Bai also saw Chu Mu and stopped in his tracks. His face turned green, red, and white. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. He wanted to fiercely glare at Chu Mu and throw a few threatening words. However, when he thought of the scene where Chu Mu killed Wang Feng on the life and death sword arena, he trembled and couldn't speak. Chu Mu's eyes lit up. His thoughts became clear. He strode towards Chi Bai, causing Chi Bai's face to change. A trace of fear flashed in his eyes, and he subconsciously dodged to the side. Chu Mu flashed and appeared in front of Chi Bai. He didn't even say a word. In front of Chi Bai's eyes, a snow-white sword light dazzled his eyes, causing him to slightly squint. Then, he felt a sharp pain on his left cheek. It was as if half of his face was about to be slapped away. He could even feel his teeth loosening and his cheek swelling. Before he could let out a scream, Chi Bai's right cheek was also slapped hard. Then, countless sword light flashed in front of his eyes. The left and right sides of his face were continuously slapped. Chi Bai's head was constantly tilted to the right and left. His neck seemed to be constantly stretched, his body swayed, and his head became dizzy. Chu Mu estimated that he had slapped enough and sheathed his sword. Chi Bai's body swayed and he saw stars. His head was spinning and he fell back. He didn't look like a human at all. His left and right cheeks were swollen like two big steamed buns. The black and red color of his cheeks were shining like ripe red plums. The slightest touch would break the skin and cause the juice inside to flow out. Chu Mu didn't use his full strength, and he also controlled the strength and angle of his slap. Therefore, there was no blood. After a while, Chi Bai's mind cleared up a little. He immediately felt a burning pain on both sides of his face, as if a red-hot branding iron was stuck on his face. Under the branding iron, there were also countless red-hot iron nails that were deeply embedded. This made him groan and moan, unable to say a word. But his eyes were staring at Chu Mu with hatred, as if he couldn't wait to swallow Chu Mu. "Do you feel unconvinced?" Chu Mu smiled faintly. "If you want to do it yourself, I don't mind fighting with you on the life and death sword arena." The words life and death sword arena made Chi Bai's heart tremble. His eyes averted, and the pain on his cheeks made him feel extremely painful. "I see that you don't have the courage to fight with me on the life and death sword arena. If you feel unconvinced, then go to the law enforcement hall and report me," Chu Mu said and turned to leave. Speaking of which, Chi Bai could only blame himself for being unlucky. Originally, Chu Mu was thinking about what kind of mistake he should make to be punished at Fierce Wind Cliff. Chi Bai just happened to appear in front of him. Chi Bai gave Chu Mu a very bad impression. He was purely a villain, but he didn't dare to make a move himself, and he couldn't threaten Chu Mu. Therefore, Chu Mu was too lazy to pay attention to him. He didn't expect that it would come in handy now. Chu Mu clearly remembered the rules of the inner sect disciples. Taking the initiative to injure other inner sect disciples was against the rules. However, taking the initiative to cause harm had a certain degree of knowledge. According to the severity of the injury, it would be divided. If it was a death, then Chu Mu would most likely be very miserable. If it was a cripple, then Chu Mu would be expelled. However, right now, it was only a flesh wound that looked rather miserable. It was like being judged at Fierce Wind Cliff to reflect on one's mistakes. Next, Chu Mu only needed to cultivate while waiting for the law enforcement hall summons. Chapter 45. After returning to the pavilion, Chu Mu entered the pond again to practice his swordsmanship. It was the basic swordsmanship. The depth of the pond was just enough to submerge Chu Mu's chest. Hence, there was a lot of resistance when he practiced. It was very obvious that he had to use more energy to make his sword faster, steadier, and more accurate. The effect of this kind of practice was several times better than practicing on land. Every time he finished practicing, he could feel that the sword in his hand seemed to be lighter and easier to wield. However, he was very clear that this was temporary. At this realm, it was very difficult to improve even a little bit. Stabbing, chopping, slicing, and so on. Every basic swordsmanship movement was done, causing the pond water to ripple. "I wonder if I can comprehend the concept of water if I practice like this?" As he cultivated, Chu Mu suddenly had this thought, but he immediately discarded it. The possibility of this happening was extremely small. After all, he had already comprehended 2 types of concept. If he wanted to comprehend a 3rd type, it would be even more difficult. 2 hours later, Chu Mu finished his sword practice. Using the rocks by the pond, he used the wind-swaying willow body technique and leapt to the 2nd floor. He dried his body and put on his clothes. Li Wei also brought up a steaming hot and fragrant meal and a bottle of wine. "Little Wei, help me prepare some dry food and water." "Let's prepare for 3 days first," Chu Mu said. "Yes, senior brother." Li Wei quickly nodded. "Is senior brother planning to go out and gain experience?" "Yes, I plan to go to Fierce Gale Cliff to cultivate," Chu Mu said. "Fierce Gale Cliff." Li Wei's eyes widened even more. Her small mouth formed an O shape. For a moment, she did not react. "Go and prepare," Chu Mu did not explain. "Yes, senior brother." Li Wei was in a daze. When she reached the stairs, she remembered that Fierce Gale Cliff was a place to reflect on one's mistakes. Did senior brother Chu do something wrong? She could not help but worry. After eating dinner and resting for a short while, Chu Mu started to comprehend the sword force. When it was deep into the night, he eliminated all distracting thoughts and allowed his mind to be empty without any pressure. After meditating for a moment, he lay down on his bed and fell asleep peacefully. The next day, Zhang Xian woke up on time and began a new day of cultivation. Not long after, he came to the wind sword platform to cultivate again, but there was still no one there. After cultivating for a while, Han Rui was the first to come out. He was even more unwilling to fight with Chu Mu, so after chatting for a while, he also began to practice his swordsmanship. Before long, more and more people came out. Morning, Senior Brother Chu. Senior Brother Chu, you're the first one to come here to practice your swordsmanship again. You're really a role model for us. We should learn from Senior Brother Chu. Senior Brother Chu, please give me some pointers on my swordsmanship. Since he had killed Wang Feng at the Life and Death Sword platform, Chu Mu's status in the Wind Sword Institute had undergone a huge change. No matter how long they had been in the institute, all the disciples who had reached stage 7 of the Sword Chi realm all called Chu Mu Senior Brother. As for the disciples who had reached stage 8, although they did not call him Senior Brother, they were very respectful to him. Chu Mu also responded with a few words with a smile. Everyone was very tactful and did not disturb him. They all began to practice their swordsmanship. At this moment Yan Ling came over. When everyone saw him, they knew that he was a law enforcement disciple. Chu Mu, come with me, Yan Ling said helplessly. Okay. Chu Mu smiled and sheathed his sword. He was very confident. What's going on? Why is the law enforcement disciple looking for Senior Brother Chu again? Is there someone else who wants to challenge Senior Brother Chu to the Life and Death Sword platform? Are you stupid? Wang Feng was killed. Wang Feng was ranked 2nd in the Thunder Institute. Even He Kaming, who was ranked 1st in the Thunder Institute, did not dare to say that he could kill Wang Feng without being injured. Now, which inner disciple in the 3 institutes dares to challenge Senior Brother Chu to the Life and Death Sword platform? Then what did Senior Brother Chu do wrong? Who knows? Han Rui said thoughtfully. Chu Mu, according to my understanding of you, you would not make such a low-level mistake. Yan Ling looked at Chu Mu and asked suspiciously. It's hard for people not to make mistakes sometimes. Chu Mu knew what Yan Ling was talking about and laughed. Yan Ling shook his head helplessly and said, Anyway, when you reach the law enforcement hall, don't make any more mistakes. This was the 2nd time that Chu Mu had entered the law enforcement hall. The law enforcement elder was already sitting upright. Lu Shui was standing at the side. When she saw Chu Mu enter, she glanced at him coldly and snorted. On the other side, there was a person with a white veil on his head. His face was much bigger than the average person's. At this moment, he was staring at Chu Mu with hatred, as if he wanted to kill Chu Mu with his eyes. Chu Mu looked at him and was amused. He deliberately pointed at this person. He looked at Yan Ling and asked in surprise, Senior Brother Yan, who is this pig-headed person? Lu Shui could not help but snort. She quickly covered her mouth. Yan Ling was stunned at first, then he smiled bitterly. The law enforcement elder did not say a word. His eyes were still closed, but the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. As for the pig-headed person, his eyes were almost spitting fire. He wanted to burn Chu Mu to ashes. He groaned a few times, but could not speak a complete sentence. Chu Mu, a disciple of the Soaring Wind Institute. The law enforcement elder opened his eyes and looked at Chu Mu. He said righteously, Chi Bai, a disciple of the Soaring Wind Institute, accused you of hurting him for no reason. Is this true? Yes. Chu Mu admitted without hesitation. Do you know that the sect rules state that inner sect disciples are not allowed to hurt each other for no reason? But you hurt Chi Bai. This is a violation of the sect rules. The law enforcement elder was not angry. Let me ask you, why did you hurt Chi Bai? Elder, I don't find him pleasing to the eye. Chu Mu gave a very strong reason. The law enforcement elder, Yen Ling, and Lu Shui were stunned. Then, their expressions became strange. The law enforcement elder did not know whether to laugh or cry. Yen Ling and Lu Shui did not know whether to laugh or cry. Especially Lu Shui, she could only force herself not to laugh. Her shoulders were slightly trembling. Qi Bai, who had been glaring fiercely at Chu Mu, almost spat out a mouthful of blood when he heard Chu Mu's powerful reason. He felt as if his head had been heavily hit, and his vision went black. He felt a wave of dizziness, and he staggered 2 steps back, almost falling down. You don't like others, but this is not a reason for you to hurt them. You hurt your fellow disciples for no reason, which is a violation of the 7th rule of the inner sect. But you did not hurt your foundation, so you don't need to be severely punished. The law enforcement elder said slowly, Chu Mu, according to the sect rules, I sentence you to 7 days at the Fierce Wind Cliff. Do you accept? I accept, Chu Mu said. His purpose was to go to the Fierce Wind Cliff. This was just what he wanted. Qi Bai, do you have any objection to my sentence? The law enforcement elder looked at Qi Bai and asked. Qi Bai hurriedly shook his head and hummed. Yen Ling, take Chu Mu to the Fierce Wind Cliff and inform his sword servant. The law enforcement elder said. Yes, elder. Yen Ling looked at Chu Mu helplessly and took Chu Mu out of the law enforcement hall. After Chu Mu and Qi Bai left, a trace of doubt flashed through the law enforcement elder's eyes. He felt that there seemed to be other reasons. Although he did not have much contact with Chu Mu, the law enforcement elder thought that he had some understanding of Chu Mu. He should not be the kind of person who would make such a mistake. But he could not figure it out. Senior brother Yen, tell me about the Fierce Wind Cliff, Chu Mu said. The Fierce Wind Cliff is not a good place. The wind is like a knife. It's unbearable. When Yen Ling mentioned the Fierce Wind Cliff, his body trembled slightly. His tone was full of fear. For inner sect disciples, the Fierce Wind Cliff is like purgatory. I really don't know why you would make such a low-level mistake. Senior brother Yen, are you also going to the Fierce Wind Cliff to reflect on your mistakes? Chu Mu asked suddenly. No, you can't say this carelessly. Yen Ling hurriedly said, I'm a law enforcement disciple. How can I knowingly break the law? It's just that sometimes I have to take people to the Fierce Wind Cliff. One time out of curiosity, I experienced it. It was really uncomfortable. Chu Mu smiled and asked Yen Ling more about the Fierce Wind Cliff. Chapter 46. Chu Mu finally experienced the power of severe wind cliff. That wind was like a sharpened knife that cut through hair. It came straight at him, cutting his face and body. After Yen Ling brought Chu Mu to Fierce Gale Cliff, he didn't stop and turned to leave. The incomparably strong wind whistled in his face, blowing his scalp and tearing his clothes to shreds. Chu Mu felt that it was very difficult for him to stand still. His entire body was practically blown against the mountain wall. He couldn't open his eyes and could only turn around to face the mountain wall with his back facing the wind. Is Senior Yen so afraid of Fierce Gale Cliff? Turns out that this place is really bad. Chu Mu couldn't help but think. If it was someone else, they would definitely feel uncomfortable and painful being blown by this wind. Luckily, I have the Sword Aura Protection secret technique. A layer of invisible sword aura is attached to the surface of my skin, blocking the wind. He faced the cliff and muttered to himself. Because he was facing the cliff, he could open his eyes and see the cliff clearly. This cliff didn't have the slightest trace of man-made excavation. It was completely blown out by the wind. Every trace seemed to have the shadow of the wind. It was messy and without any pattern. But as he looked at it, Chu Mu felt that there seemed to be some mystery in it. It was about to come out, but it was stuck and couldn't come out. He kept staring until his eyes were sore. This feeling still didn't come out and he had to give up temporarily. At this time, he realized that the wind that was tearing his hair and tearing his clothes had become much weaker. He slowly turned around and faced his back to the mountain wall. Although the wind was still strong and constantly howling, it had already reached a tolerable level. How do I comprehend the concept of wind? Chumu thought to himself. Although his goal was clear, he didn't know where to start. The High Wind Palm Academy said that different people have different ways of comprehending the concept. My method may not be effective for you. Therefore, only the method you find is the most suitable for you. The concept of wind from before was completely comprehended under the circumstances where he was unaware of it. Since I can't think of anything, I'll just practice my sword technique. My state of wind was comprehended from the clear wind sword technique. Hopefully, I can gain something from the clear wind sword technique, Chumu thought to himself after thinking for a while. However, he knew that his breeze swordsmanship had already reached perfection, and it would be difficult for him to gain anything from it. Without any hesitation, Zhang Xian drew his sword and began practicing the breeze swordsmanship. The strong wind continuously blew from the front, not stopping for even a second. Chumu's breeze swordsmanship was affected, and he couldn't move as freely as before. Isn't practicing sword arts in such a gale the same as practicing sword arts in the water different from practicing sword arts in a different way? If I can execute the clear wind sword technique to perfection in this strong wind, I might be able to break through the limits of the clear wind sword technique and comprehend its essence. Breeze caress. A breeze blew over, and the killing intent that appeared was shattered by the strong wind. Dazzling breeze. Before the 8 killing intents could be destroyed, they were also shattered by the strong wind. Absolute kill of the clear wind. The nearly 1 meter long light green wind blade was the absolute kill of the breeze with the concept of wind. It was very powerful, but it only flew 3 to 4 meters before it was blown to pieces by the strong wind that suddenly increased in strength. The wind that blew over started to become unstable. Sometimes it was a cool breeze, sometimes it was a howling gale, sometimes it was a violent gale, and sometimes it was calm. Under these circumstances, Chumu practiced the cool breeze sword art over and over again. However, the moment his cool breeze sword art was used, it would often be shattered by the wind, losing its power. However, he wasn't discouraged. He forgot about the concept of wind and everything else. He only thought about practicing sword techniques and adapting to this kind of environment. When he was tired, he stopped to rest. When he used up all his sword chi, he stopped to recover. When he was hungry, he ate the dry food that Li Wei brought over. When he was thirsty, he drank the water that Li Wei brought over. When the strong wind was like a blade, he turned around and faced the mountain wall. He continued to stare at the countless messy marks left by the wind, hoping to comprehend something. In the blink of an eye, a day had passed. Chumu only closed his eyes to take a short nap. When he woke up, he was full of energy and continued to practice. The next day, he still had to practice the Zhongyuan sword chi manual. When a swordsman was in the sword chi realm, the practice of sword chi was completely the transformation of the chi within the body. It didn't have much to do with the outside world. However, when he practiced the second level of the sword chi protective mystic technique, he encountered great difficulty. The sword chi protective mystic technique was formed from external sword chi. However, in this environment where the strong wind was like a blade, the surrounding air was constantly being attacked. This made it difficult for Chumu to mobilize the sword chi within 2 meters of him. I don't believe that I can't do it. A wave of stubbornness surged up. Chumu focused all of his attention, feeling the chi around him and controlling the sword chi around him. He controlled it bit by bit. Even though the strong wind constantly blew and scattered it, Chumu was still able to gather a small portion. Little by little, it became a lot. After expending a great deal of effort, Chumu finally finished practicing the sword chi protective mystic technique. He felt both mentally and physically exhausted. He had no choice but to stop and rest for a while. Then, he continued to practice the clear wind sword art. He didn't know if doing this would allow him to deepen his understanding of the concept of wind. He could only do it subconsciously and work hard. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. The dry rations and water that Li Wei had prepared were all gone. Li Wei once again brought them over. She had originally planned to stay a while longer, but the wind here was too strong. With only a stage 5 cultivation, she simply couldn't withstand it and had to leave. On the 4th day, Chu Mu once again practiced the Zhongyuan Sword Qi manual. After he finished, he practiced the Sword Qi protective mystic technique. He suddenly discovered that the range of Sword Qi he could mobilize had exceeded 2 meters, reaching nearly 2.5 meters. It seems that practicing in this environment is quite useful, he muttered. He was even more motivated to practice. The greater the range of Sword Qi a sword master could control, the more powerful they would be. According to Chu Mu's knowledge, the strongest sword master in the Sword Arts Association on Earth could control the range of Sword Qi up to 100 meters. It was very powerful. One Sword Qi could cut open a mountain. Clear wind blowing. A clear wind was once again blown away by the strong wind. However, Chu Mu could feel that it lasted longer. Dazzling wind. 8 streaks of killing intent intertwined and collided with the strong wind. They left 8 faint marks before they were shattered. Clear wind kill. A 1-meter-long wind blade was shot out. It flew 4 or 5 meters, leaving behind a faint mark before it shattered. All of this indicated that Chu Mu's practice in these 3 days had significant result. However, his understanding of the concept of wind still hadn't deepened. However, Chu Mu had a feeling that if he had more time, he would be able to see something from the marks left behind by the strong wind. Chapter 47. The Thunder Academy was one of the 3 inner academies. It was compulsory to learn the Thunder Sword technique. The inner disciples of the Thunder Academy had always been the most active and arrogant among the 3 academies. In terms of overall strength, the Thunder Academy was superior to the Soaring Wind Academy and the Jadewater Academy. But now, the Thunder Academy was no longer as lively as it used to be. It was dead silent. When He Kaming walked into the Thunder Academy, he frowned slightly. A trace of doubt and confusion flashed in his eyes. This was completely different from the Thunder Academy he was familiar with. Although the path was still the same, the pavilion was still the same, and the scenery was the same, the atmosphere was different. I've only been away for less than a month. What happened? He Kaming couldn't wait to know. He quickened his pace and walked towards the Thunder Sword platform. On the Thunder Sword platform, there were more than 10 inner disciples practicing the Thunder Sword technique. Crackling sounds could be heard constantly, as if there were countless electric arcs jumping around. He Kaming walked up the platform and looked over. He frowned immediately. Although these junior brothers seemed to be working hard, they were lifeless and a little numb. This kind of practice didn't have any effect at all. You, come here. Coincidentally, a disciple looked at He Kaming. He Kaming pointed at him and said in a dignified tone. The disciple's body trembled. Only then did he see who it was. Immediately, his face was filled with excitement. He shouted, "Senior brother He, you're finally back, you're finally back." These words shocked the other disciples. They stopped practicing and looked over. When they saw He Kaming, they were all excited. It was as if they had seen the light at the end of the tunnel. "Senior brother He, you're finally back." "Great, senior brother He is finally back. Our Thunder Academy doesn't need to suffer anymore." Everyone was so excited that tears streamed down their faces. This made He Kaming even more puzzled. His frown deepened. "Enough!" He Kaming shouted, stunning the 10 disciples. His eyes flashed, as if there were faint purple electric arcs jumping around. He said in a dignified and domineering manner, "What's going on? What happened in the month I was away? Why are you all like this? Senior brother He, the situation is like this. Senior brother, this is what happened." Everyone was talking at once. "Shut up and speak." He Kaming once again shouted in a low voice, suppressing the crowd. Soon after, he pointed at one of them and said, "Yes, senior brother." Thus, the disciple began to recount the entire story in detail, adding in his own emotions to the story. Finally, with incomparable grief and indignation, he recounted what had happened to the disciples of the rumbling Thunder Hall. In the past, when the disciples of the Thunder Academy faced the disciples of the other academies, they would always be arrogant and domineering, trying to steal the limelight. However, things were different now. Once they became arrogant, the other party only needed to say a single word to strike them down. If you want to be arrogant, why don't you do it to Chu Mu? Originally, Wang Feng and Chu Mu had fought on the life and death sword arena. In the end, Wang Feng had died and Chu Mu had survived. Although it was shocking, in the end, what should have passed would pass. However, because of this matter, the disciples of the rumbling Thunder Hall were repeatedly struck down. Who would dare to find trouble with that freak, Chu Mu? Who would dare to be arrogant in front of him? As a result, the disciples of the rumbling Thunder Hall had no choice but to keep a low profile, which was why they had become so lifeless. As a 7th-level Sword Chi realm practitioner, he killed Wang Feng, who was at the peak of 8th level, on the life and death sword arena without any injuries. He Kaming's eyelids twitched, and his pupils contracted. His expression changed drastically, and he was shocked. He could not believe it. He knew Wang Feng's strength. Wang Feng was ranked 2nd in the rumbling Thunder Hall, just below him. Although he needed less than 10 moves to defeat Wang Feng, if it had been a life-and-death battle, it would have been more than that. Moreover, even if he could kill Wang Feng in the end, he would have suffered some injuries. "Senior brother now that you're back, you have to uphold justice for us. You have to stand up for our rumbling Thunder Hall." An inner disciple shouted, and the other inner disciples echoed his words. "All right, I know what to do." He Kaming shouted, and then he thought again. After a month of training, I'm already one step away from 9th level. In terms of cultivation, I'm above Wang Feng, and my rumbling thunder sword art is stronger than Deshang's. In terms of power, I'm stronger than Deshang's rumbling thunder sword art. If I were to have a life-and-death battle with Wang Feng, I should be able to kill Wang Feng without any injuries. He Kaming made some calculations and made a comparison. His current strength was obviously much stronger than a month ago. A month ago, he could already defeat Wang Feng in 10 moves, let alone now. This time, he came back with the intention of going into seclusion for a period of time to smoothly break through to 9th level. Then, he would be able to enter the main hall and become an elite disciple. He did not expect to encounter such a situation as soon as he came back. It seemed that his reputation had weakened after leaving for a month, and he had been forgotten. "You guys, who is going to the High Wind Courtyard to issue a challenge? I want to have a sword duel with Chu Mu." He Kaming said. "Senior brother I heard that Chu Mu broke the sex rules by injuring an inner disciple of the same courtyard for no reason. He was sentenced to 7 days of reflection at the Fierce Wind Cliff. Only 3 days have passed, and today is the 4th day. Broke the sex rules." He Kaming couldn't help but sneer. In his heart, he looked down on Chu Mu. It seems that this Chu Mu thinks he's a genius just because he defeated Wang Feng. He's so arrogant that he forgot himself. Such a person won't amount to much. Fine, after he finishes reflecting, I'll make him sober up. A worm should have its own way. Don't dream of becoming a dragon. Well said, senior brother. Let's let Chu Mu be arrogant for a few more days. He Kaming's words immediately raised the spirits of these 10 inner disciples. Soon, they spread the news to the entire Thunder Courtyard, High Wind Courtyard, and Blue Water Courtyard. Thus, a new round of discussion appeared. The strong wind blew like a knife, but Chu Mu faced it head-on. He did not move at all. His whole person was holding his sword horizontally in front of him, like an ancient statue. Immediately, he swung his sword. It seemed ordinary, but it was steady. It was not affected by the strong wind at all. It was as if the sword was swung out from a gap in the wind. I can feel the wind's attack and the wind's trajectory. Chu Mu closed his eyes and practiced his sword. It was not the breeze sword art, but the basic sword art. Each move was very ordinary and slow. Chu Mu listened to the sword and touched the sword, carefully feeling the strong wind blowing, the feeling of the sword, the hand, and the body. He did not even realize what kind of move he was using when he swung his sword. He was just following a kind of instinct. Today was the 7th morning of Chu Mu's reflection at the fierce wind cliff. What is wind? This question jumped into his mind once again. Wind, formless, colorless, tasteless, boundless, all-pervasive, and everywhere. That day, when I was practicing the breeze sword art at the cliff, I entered into an epiphany and comprehended the concept of wind. Today, on the 7th day of reflection at the fierce wind cliff, facing the strong wind and looking at the wind marks on the cliff, I finally comprehended something. Chu Mu's sword speed gradually increased. On the 100 refined sword, it was as if it was wrapped in a layer of faint airflow. Countless wind blew past from the side. Not only did it not block the sword, it seemed to increase its speed again. It was like a fish in water, like an eagle soaring in the sky. Chu Mu only felt that he seemed to have merged into this wind. Whether it was the breeze or the wind or the strong wind, he danced with the wind. His feet left the ground, swaying on the fierce wind cliff like a willow, straight to the sky, leaving behind many afterimages. After an unknown amount of time, Chu Mu woke up and landed on the ground, sheathing his sword. The blade-like strong wind also weakened at this time, turning into a strong wind that did not affect Chu Mu at all. With one epiphany, the concept of wind has reached 20%, the range of my sword chi has also increased to 3 meters, and the swinging willow wind movement technique has broken through the shackles. The current swinging willow wind movement technique is no longer a low-level movement technique, but a middle-level movement technique. It should be changed to a new name. Chu Mu said to himself. The new movement technique can more directly and easily feel the airflow, dancing with the wind like a fish swimming in water. Let's call it swimming in the wind. Chapter 48. Senior brother Chu Mu has left the fierce gale cliff and is returning to the towering wind courtyard. Yes, let's go to the towering wind courtyard. He Kaming said and strode out of the thunder courtyard towards the towering wind courtyard. Let's go to the towering wind courtyard. Therefore, more than 20 inner disciples of the thunder courtyard followed He Kaming and strode towards the towering wind courtyard. 20% of the wind conception, the fierce gale cliff is of no help to me. Chu Mu strode briskly, as if his whole body was about to float with the wind. He was very happy. With the improvement of the wind conception, he felt that the air flowing around him was wind. No matter how strong or light it was, it had a kind of intimate feeling. He couldn't help but perform the travel in the wind technique, and his whole body left the ground. After taking a few steps, he seemed to be lifted by the wind, dancing and changing with the wind. He took a full 5 or 6 meters before landing on the ground. The travel in the wind technique already had the ability to fly for a short distance. This time, after 7 days of cultivation at the fierce gale cliff, Chu Mu's progress was obvious. The wind conception has improved to 20%, but the cloud conception is less than 10%. Except for the cliffs and precipices, there seems to be no other suitable place to comprehend the cloud conception. Chu Mu walked towards the towering wind courtyard while thinking to himself, I already have the swordsmanship, body movement, and footwork. It is enough for now, but my sword chi cultivation is only at the early stage of the 7th stage. The most urgent thing is to improve the sword chi cultivation and the cloud conception. However, 20% of the wind conception should be enough to deal with all kinds of situations, so I should improve my cultivation to the 8th stage first. Chu Mu made the first choice between the cultivation and the cloud conception. If I want to improve my cultivation as soon as possible, I must have enough Qi training pills. One Qi training pill is 100 contribution points. Well, it seems that I have to go to the sword battle arena. The sword battle arena was a special platform built by the Qingfeng sword sect for the disciples of the three courtyards. It had a unique rule that one could obtain Qi training pills. The Towering Wind sect master told Chu Mu about this. Let's go back to the pavilion to wash up and rest for a while before heading to the arena. He had been cultivating wholeheartedly for the past 7 days at Severe Gale Cliff. He did not even have time to wash up. Now, he felt a little uncomfortable. However, when Chu Mu was about to arrive at the Towering Wind courtyard, he saw a large number of people gathered around the stone tablet of the Towering Wind courtyard, estimated to be as many as 50 or 60 people. Sweeping his gaze across the crowd, Zhang Xian noticed that there were inner disciples of the Soaring Wind Hall, inner disciples of the Rumbling Thunder Hall, and inner disciples of the Jade Water Hall. While he was still in the midst of his astonishment, someone suddenly shouted, "Chu Mu is here!" In an instant, everyone turned their gazes over with sharp gazes. From the looks of it, he knew that they were looking for him. "You're Chu Mu? He doesn't seem to have 3 heads and 6 arms. He looks very ordinary." He took a few steps forward. His eyes were as sharp as swords as he hugged his sword and chuckled. There was a hint of disapproval in his tone towards Chu Mu. "May I ask how the extraordinary you have 3 heads and 6 arms?" Chu Mu asked with a faint smile. "Humph." He Kaming's expression changed slightly. "Your words are quite sharp. I hope you're not just good at talking." "Chu Mu, listen up. He is the eldest senior brother of the Rumbling Thunder Hall, He Kaming. He is the strongest person in the Rumbling Thunder Hall. Do you know what it means to be the strongest? It's not the strongest sword skill, it's the strongest sword skill and cultivation." "That's right. Wang Feng couldn't even take 10 moves from senior brother He." Immediately, 2 disciples of the Rumbling Thunder Hall jumped out and spoke to Chu Mu in an arrogant tone. "Oh, the strongest senior brother of the Rumbling Thunder Hall, what can I do for you?" Chu Mu's expression didn't change as he said indifferently, "I don't dare to say that I can teach you anything. I just heard that junior brother Chu Mu is the strongest person in the 3 halls. I feel that my sword skill is not bad, so I'm itching to have a spar with you." Although He Kaming's words sounded polite, there was a hint of arrogance in them. "Please." Chu Mu smiled faintly. Coincidentally, he was also itching to have a spar. He wanted to know how powerful the breeze sword art was with 20% of the win mentality. It just so happened that a decent opponent was sent to him. With a clang, He Kaming pulled out his sword. The sword light shone like lightning. The disciples of the 3 halls all backed away, creating a huge empty space. "Pull out your sword." He Kaming pointed his sword at Chu Mu and said in a domineering tone. A thunder-like powerful aura spread out and assaulted Chu Mu's face. Chu Mu unhurriedly pulled out his sword. Like the wind and clouds, he was calm and composed, without a single ripple. "I'll use my full power. I hope you won't disappoint me." He Kaming shouted and attacked without holding anything back. With a swing of his sword, a faint purple sword chi shot through the air. The powerful sword chi caused the grass on the ground to break and dance in the air. Chu Mu could feel the airflow caused by the sword chi. Just by casually moving his body, the faint purple sword chi almost brushed past his body. It made people gasp and sweat profusely. Then, He Kaming used the thunder light steps and turned into a beam of lightning as he approached Yi Chen. His sword pierced through the air like lightning, creating a huge cracking sound. That sword was not only fast but also fierce. Its power was shocking. In the eyes of the crowd, it was like a flash of lightning in the dark sky, about to tear the world apart. So fast. Chu Mu was slightly surprised. This He Kaming was indeed powerful. That sword attack was even sharper and fiercer than Wang Feng's. If it were 7 days ago, Chu Mu would have found it difficult to handle. But now, he was calm. His body swayed as if he was dancing in the wind. Chu Mu could easily feel the subtle airflow. Therefore, when He Kaming's powerful sword pierced towards him, Chu Mu easily dodged it. It was as if he was taking a stroll in the garden, watching the flowers bloom and fall. His clothes fluttered in the wind, giving him an indescribable elegance. No matter how fast or fierce He Kaming's sword was, it couldn't do anything to him. The spectating disciples of the 3 campuses all had their mouths wide open. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. He Kaming was on the verge of coughing out blood. The galloping thunder swordsmanship was a mid-tier sword technique that focused on speed and destructive power. Executing the basic stance of the galloping thunder swordsmanship, each sword strike was faster and more ferocious than the previous one. Not only that, the sword chi in his entire body was activated, and on the surface of his sword, a layer of faint violet sword chi danced about. However, Chu Mu was like a ghost floating under his sword. Every time he felt that he was about to stab Chu Mu would dodge by a hair's breadth. It was as if he was dancing on the tip of the sword. What kind of movement is this? It's so graceful and elegant. Senior brother Chu seems to be more powerful than 7 days ago. A sharp-eyed inner disciple of the Soaring Wind Institute said secretly. Do you only know how to dodge? He Kaming suddenly retracted his sword and stopped attacking. He shouted angrily with a pale face. He had used the 9 basic moves of the lightning sword art, but he couldn't even touch the corner of Chu Mu's clothes. This made him feel very depressed. I already know your sword skills. There's no need to continue. Chu Mu said neither slowly nor quickly. I'm going to use the middle-rank sword technique Clear Wind Sword Art's final killing move, Clear Wind Absolute Kill. You should also use your strongest killing move. One move will decide the victor. One move to determine the winner? Alright, my strongest move is the final move of the mid-level lightning sword art, Lightning Break the Sky. He Kaming said, full of confidence. His galloping thunder swordsmanship was extremely powerful, and its speed was even faster. After that, the sword chi in He Kaming's entire body was mobilized, causing a layer of fine light violet arcs of lightning to emerge from his body. They crackled as they leaped about, and it caused one's scalp to go numb. This might was much greater than Wang Feng from that day. Senior brother, he is so powerful. The power of this move must be amazing. Senior brother, he is the strongest. He Kaming's aura shocked the disciples of the 3 academies. For a moment, they felt as if they were possessed by the Thunder Sword God. Then, He Kaming slowly waved his sword forward. It seemed to be very fast, but in fact, it was so fast that it made people see an illusion. However, it couldn't escape from Chu Mu's gaze. Countless arcs of lightning all flew towards the 100 refined sword, transforming into a light purple sword beam that was intertwined with countless arcs of lightning. Like a bolt of lightning that ripped apart the dark sky, it descended with a destructive momentum and shot towards Chu Mu. Lightning break the sky. The disciples of the 3 academies trembled. They felt that their eyes couldn't bear the dazzling light and they all squinted. Death of the breeze. On the other hand, Chu Mu casually waved his sword. In a split second, a light cyan wind blade over a meter long condensed and slashed out, colliding with the light purple sword beam that broke through the air. In an instant, the wind blade released an unparalleled sharpness. It actually cut the purple sword light apart and rushed towards He Kaming. Impossible! He Kaming's body trembled and his face changed. He couldn't believe that his strongest killing move was cut apart by his opponent. This was illogical. It was simply a fantasy. The wind blade was too fast and too strong. He Kaming was shocked and couldn't dodge it. He could only mobilize his sword chi and condense it in front of his chest to form a chi armor. The wind blade completely cut the purple sword light, shook off He Kaming's sword, and hit He Kaming's chest. With a bang, He Kaming groaned. The chi armor in front of his chest was broken and the wind blade was also broken. However, the huge force sent He Kaming's body flying back a few meters. After landing, he staggered back a few steps before he could stand firm. He Kaming's face turned green, red, and white. He couldn't say a word. The disciples of the 3 academies all opened their eyes. For a moment, they couldn't react. However, when they saw the calm Chu Mu and the somewhat embarrassed He Kaming, they knew the result. However, they couldn't believe it. Sheathing his sword, Chu Mu glanced at He Kaming and walked towards the Lingfeng courtyard. Everyone consciously made way for him. They looked at Chu Mu's back. They only felt that Chu Mu's back seemed to be infinitely enlarged. It contained infinite sharpness and was the best in the 3 academies. No one could compete with him. Chapter 49. Killing Wang Feng at the Life and Death Arena and reflecting on his mistakes at Fierce Gale Cliff for 7 days. Everyone was talking about Chu Mu. Now, after reflecting on his mistakes for 7 days at Fierce Gale Cliff, Chu Mu had once again shocked the 3 academies. He had easily defeated He Kaming, the number 1 of Thunder Academy. With this achievement, he announced that Chu Mu was the number 1 swordsman in the 3 academies. After returning to the pavilion, Li Wei was extremely happy. He washed up with warm water and changed into a clean and fresh gown. After chatting with Li Wei for a while and giving her some pointers on swordsmanship, he went to the balcony on the 2nd floor. During the 7 days of cultivation at Fierce Gale Cliff, he had completely given up on comprehending the sword momentum. Now, he was revising it. Li Wei carefully cooked a sumptuous dinner. There were 2 more exquisite dishes than usual. She served them to Chu Mu. Food was the most important thing in the world. No one would dislike delicious food. Especially after a busy period, they could steal half a day of leisure to eat some delicious food and drink a cup of wine. They could watch the clouds in the sky and the ripples in the pond accompanied by a cool breeze. Chu Mu had a good rest for the night. He didn't think or practice. He just sat there quietly, watching the starry sky and chatting with Li Wei from time to time. After a good night's sleep, he woke up at dawn the next day. He was full of energy. After washing up, he began to practice the Zhongyuan sword chi art and the sword chi protection mystic art. During the 7 days at Fierce Gale Cliff, he increased the range of his sword chi from 2 meters to 3 meters. The increase in range gave him more stamina and made the practice of the sword chi protection mystic art more efficient. It was late autumn. The dew was heavy and cold. Chu Mu came to Fierce Gale Sword Arena again to practice his swordsmanship. After he finished practicing the basic swordsmanship, Han Rui came when he was about to start practicing Fierce Gale sword art. "Do you want to have a few moves?" Chu Mu asked. "No, I'm not a person who wants to be abused." Han Rui decisively refused. If their swordsmanship was similar, it would be interesting to have a fight. If the difference was too big, it would be like a child fighting with a strong man. At this time, many inner disciples appeared earlier than usual. "Senior Brother Chu." "Good morning, Senior Chu. I thought that I would be the first to arrive, but I didn't expect that I wouldn't be as early as Senior Brother Chu." "How can you compare to Senior Brother Chu?" Everyone was talking at once. Chu Mu laughed. Right now, he had become the golden signboard of Towering Wind Courtyard, the pillar of support. After chatting for a while, everyone began to practice their swordsmanship. It seemed that because of Chu Mu's presence, these inner disciples were particularly hard-working in their swordsmanship. The atmosphere was very good, which made Han Rui envious. It would be great if he could have such influence one day. "Han Rui, take me to the sword battle arena," Chu Mu whispered to Han Rui. "Battle arena?" Han Rui looked at Chu Mu with a strange expression and said, "Don't tell me you want to take over the arena?" Han Rui was very clear about what kind of place the sword battle arena was. It was specially built for the disciples of the 3 courtyards, or in other words, for the inner disciples of Qingfeng sword sect between the early 7th and late 8th phase. The sword battle arena had special rules and rewards. Because it was a competition of swordsmanship, they used unsharpened swords. Moreover, they couldn't kill or seriously injure the opponent. Light injuries were nothing. There was only one sword battle arena, and whoever was on it was the arena master. According to the sect rules, if a person was the arena master for 5 days, they could get 1 chi refining pill, and 2 for 10 days. So on and so forth, they could get 6 chi refining pills a month. However, the total number of 7th and 8th stage disciples in the 3 courtyards was close to 300. Moreover, there were also dozens of 7th and 8th stage disciples from the main palace. There was only one sword battle arena, and because they could obtain chi refining pills, all of the 7th and 8th stage inner court disciples flocked to it like a flock of ducks. After all, a single chi refining pill cost 100 contribution points. If one wanted to break through from the early 7th phase to the 8th phase, they would need at least 5 or 6 chi refining pills, which was 5 or 600 contribution points. They could only be obtained by doing missions for a long time. In the past, Han Rui had tried his luck in the sword battle arena. In the end, he was defeated in less than a day. Later, he was unwilling to give up and challenged another 10 or so times. However, he was never able to defend the arena for more than 2 days. Over time, he gave up on this thought and focused on cultivating. According to Han Rui's knowledge, Xiao Qianfeng, who was recognized as the strongest disciple in the Soaring Wind courtyard, was only able to defend for 10 days and get 2 chi refining pills. At that time, Xiao Qianfeng's cultivation had only broken through to the 8th phase. After defending for 10 days, he was defeated by a peak 8th phase disciple from the main palace. After that, Xiao Qianfeng didn't enter the sword battle arena again. When he reached the peak of the 8th phase, chi refining pills had no effect on him. Now that he heard Chu Mu mention the sword battle arena, Han Rui suddenly recalled many memories. At the same time, he also thought of one thing. Although Chu Mu's cultivation was at the early 7th phase of the sword chi realm, he was able to kill the peak 8th phase Wang Feng and defeat the even stronger He Kaming. With such a terrifying sword technique, wouldn't he be able to dominate the sword battle arena? Han Rui couldn't help but think of the scene where Chu Mu swept through the sword battle arena and became the arena master, directly dominating the sword battle arena until he didn't want to be the arena master anymore. Han Rui didn't think that in the entire Azure Edge Sword sect, there was anyone under the 9th phase who could defeat Chu Mu. "Let's go, I'll take you to the sword battle arena," Han Rui suddenly said, because he really wanted to know if Chu Mu could dominate the sword battle arena for a long time. According to his estimation, Chu Mu was currently at the early 7th phase. If he wanted to break through to the 8th phase, he would need 5 or 6 chi refining pills. That would be dominating the sword battle arena for a month. After that, if he wanted to go from the early 8th phase to the peak of the 8th phase, he would need at least double the amount of chi refining pills. It seemed that in the history of the Azure Edge Sword sect, there had never been anyone who occupied the sword battle arena for 3 months. Not even a month. Chu Mu didn't know what Han Rui was thinking. He sheathed his sword and left the Soaring Wind sword arena with Han Rui. He left the Soaring Wind courtyard and went to the sword battle arena. On one side, Han Rui explained to Chu Mu about the sword battle arena and the sword battle steel, as well as the people who had left their names on the steel and their achievements. The sword battle arena was some distance away from the 3 courtyards. It occupied a large area and could accommodate more than 1,000 people at the same time. In the middle, there was a half-meter tall stone platform about 10 meters long and 10 meters wide. Next to it, there was a small pavilion where the administrator of the sword battle arena usually rested. Chen Jin was 36 years old this year, and his cultivation was at the early 10th stage of the sword chi realm. He was one of the deacons of the sword faction, and was assigned to manage the sword battle arena by the sword faction. Now, he was sitting not far from the sword battle arena, watching 2 disciples compete in sword technique. After watching for a while, he felt that it was boring. He looked at a stone steel that was like a sword pointing to the sky. There were 3 big red words on it: Sword Battle Steel. On the sword battle steel, there were more than a dozen small bronze swords that were a little longer than a thumb. There were words engraved on them. These small bronze swords were arranged from top to bottom. It has been a long time since a disciple was able to leave their name on the sword battle steel. Chen Jin sighed inwardly. Then, he looked at the disciple who had defeated another challenger on the sword battle arena. The 5th day. I hope he can become the next disciple qualified to leave his name on the sword battle steel. Chapter 50. You are not my opponent, go down. Yu Ying's eyes were sharp as he looked at the person opposite him. He slightly shook his head and said disapprovingly, We haven't even fought yet, how do you know that I am not your opponent? The person who heard Yu Ying's words showed an angry expression. He waved his sword a few times and said angrily, It seems that if I don't make a move, you will not give up. Yu Ying sighed. His expression became arrogant. With a swoosh, he drew a flower with his sword and said, Make your move. I will let you know the difference between the disciples of the main palace and the disciples of the 3 academies. The disciple was angry when he heard Yu Ying's words. His expression did not change. He attacked first. His sword was extremely fast. The sword light flashed and all of them pierced towards Yu Ying. Yu Ying smiled and casually waved his sword. With only one sword, he broke a dozen of his opponent's sword. The sword light rotated and moved his opponent's sword to the side. He then pushed his sword forward and the tip of his sword was pressed against his opponent's throat. You lost. Yu Ying seemed to be regretful. It was as if he wanted to lose but couldn't. As expected, the disciples of the 3 courtyards can't be compared with the disciples of the main palace. This Yu Ying really has some skills, Chen Jin said to himself. He is only at the middle of the 8th phase, but he has defeated so many 8th phase inner disciples. It is already late. In another quarter of an hour, the 5 days will be up. I hope that he can continue for another 5 days and become the next disciple qualified to leave his name on the battle sword tablet. In other words, Chen Jin already believed that Yu Ying would win. In the remaining quarter of an hour, no one could be his opponent. After all, disciples at the peak of the 8th phase would not come here because they did not need qi refining pills. Moreover, there was a rule that disciples at the peak of the 8th phase were not allowed to enter the battle sword stage. Who said that the disciples of the 3 courtyards are not as good as the disciples of the main palace? If you think that you are strong, then go and challenge Chu Mu of the Soaring Wind courtyard. The disciple who was defeated by Yu Ying was a middle of the 8th phase inner disciple of the Thunder courtyard. He refused to accept the result. Is Chu Mu from the High Wind department the new inner disciple who is known as the best swordsman in the 3 departments? Hearing this, Yu Ying smiled again and said proudly, You can call him over now. I'll wait for him here. I'm just afraid that he doesn't have the guts to come. At this time, Chu Mu and Han Rui happened to be approaching the sword battle arena. Both Chu Mu and Han Rui heard these words. Han Rui looked at Chu Mu with a strange expression, and then looked at Yu Ying on the stage. He secretly felt sorry for Yu Ying. Han Rui didn't think that Yu Ying would be a match for Chu Mu. Chu Mu is here. The inner disciple of the Thunder Courtyard who was angrily about to leave the stage saw Chu Mu and his eyes lit up. Yu Ying immediately looked at him and said, You are Chu Mu. I heard that you are the best swordsman in the 3 courtyards. Come and fight with me. Let me give you some pointers. It will be easier for you to join the main palace in the future. Yu Ying's arrogant words made the disciples of the 3 courtyards angry. Even Han Rui was very unhappy. The disciples of the main palace in the Qingfeng sword sect had always thought that they were the orthodox disciples of the sect and were superior to the disciples of the 3 courtyards. Therefore, from time to time, they would praise themselves and belittle the disciples of the 3 courtyards. Because of this, there were many conflicts. However, the disciples of the 3 courtyards were always at a disadvantage, which encouraged the disciples of the main palace to be arrogant. Senior Brother Chu, teach him a lesson. Let him know that he is the best swordsman in the 3 courtyards. Senior Brother Chu, I support you. Senior Brother Chu, let him have a taste of your sword. Senior Brother Chu, this sword is for you. Someone even brought Chu Mu an unsharpened sword of 100 refinements. After Chu Mu took it, he handed his sword to Han Rui and asked him to hold it for the time being. Then, he tapped his foot lightly and leaped into the air like a big bird. He landed on the stage with a calm and elegant posture, which made the crowd gasp in surprise. His body movement is not bad. Yu Ying was slightly surprised. This disciple called Chu Mu has a good body movement. Chen Jin's eyes suddenly lit up. He has been in the limelight recently. I wonder how his swordsmanship is. He seemed to be looking forward to it. Make your move. I'll let you know that even if you're the number 1 disciple of the 3 campuses, there's still a huge gap between you and us from the main hall. Yu Ying flicked his wrist and a sword flower appeared. Chu Mu did not say a word. He looked indifferent and did not refuse. Only Han Rui was laughing in his heart. Letting Chu Mu make the first move, Yu Ying was simply courting death. However, the disciples of the main palace had always been arrogant. It was good to let him suffer a little. The snow-white sword light was like a rainbow and a cool breeze. Chen Jin's pupils shrank instantly. He was at the early 10th phase and had a certain level of attainment in swordsmanship. He could tell at a glance that this sword was not ordinary. He was shocked. Yu Ying's expression suddenly changed. He felt that although the sword was not fast and was very ordinary, as if it was just a casual stab, it gave him a feeling that he could not dodge it. It was as if no matter where he dodged or how he reacted, it would affect his entire body. Yu Ying clenched his teeth and quickly stabbed out with his sword. He wanted to use his powerful sword chi and fast swordsmanship to defeat Chu Mu's sword. However, when the 2 swords collided, Yu Ying only felt that the power of his sword disappeared like a stone sinking into the sea. He did not have time to be surprised. He only felt that his sword was pulled by a gentle force and uncontrollably moved to one side. A snow-white light quickly enlarged in front of his eyes. He did not even have time to react before the tip of the sword was pressed against his throat. You are too weak, Chu Mu said indifferently and withdrew his sword. Yu Ying's expression changed. He was blue, then red, then white. He was arrogant, but in the end, he was defeated by a sword. This huge difference made Yu Ying unable to accept it. He only felt a mouthful of blood rush up and stuck in his throat. He could not move forward or backward. Brother Chu, good job. The swordsmanship of the disciples of the main palace is only SOSO. Haha, you are only 15 minutes away from the end of the 5 days. Who told you to shamelessly challenge Brother Chu? Now, you know how powerful I am. Regret it. Hearing this, Yu Ying could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. His face turned pale and his cheeks became unhealthily red. He glared at Chu Mu fiercely and glanced at the crowd. Then, he raised his chi and flew away. His back was a little embarrassed. Chu Mu felt that this disciple of the main palace would not let him go so easily. Chu Mu's swordsmanship is very powerful. Chen Jin gasped. Perhaps if he used his full strength, he could defeat or even kill Chu Mu. However, that was because his sword chi cultivation was many times higher than Chu Mu's. If he ignored his sword chi cultivation and only focused on swordsmanship, he felt that he would not be able to take more than 10 moves from Chu Mu. What a pity! Yu Ying is only 15 minutes away from the end of the 5 days. He will be able to get a chi training pill, but I think Brother Chu is not suitable for being the best swordsman of the 3 campuses. Being the best swordsman of the Qingfeng sword sect is more suitable for Brother Chu. A disciple of the 3 campuses said. Yeah, I think that makes sense too. Chu Mu did not care about these comments. Whether it was the best swordsman of the 3 campuses or the best swordsman of the Qingfeng sword sect, Chu Mu did not care. He would not accept or reject it. It was all up to him. "Who wants to fight with me?" Chu Mu said softly. His voice entered everyone's ears. Instantly, the entire place fell silent. Everyone looked at each other. They were all clear that they probably couldn't withstand a single strike from Chu Mu, and they weren't willing to go up and embarrass themselves. "Haha, let me fight with you, Brother Chu." A disciple flew onto the fighting sword stage and saluted Chu Mu with his sword. "Although I know that I'm not Senior Brother's match, being able to fight Senior Brother and experience Senior Brother's unfathomable sword techniques will definitely be of help to me." This disciple's words immediately made the other disciples' eyes light up. They felt that it was very reasonable. Yes, although he was not a match for Chu Mu, wasn't it a form of learning from a swordsman like Chu Mu? Chapter 51. "Please enlighten me, Senior Apprentice Brother Chu Mu," said a middle stage 8th stage inner disciple as he respectfully saluted Chu Mu. He couldn't even remember how many times he had challenged Chu Mu in the past 30 days. In short, every time he challenged Chu Mu, he was defeated by Chu Mu in a single strike. Even so, he could clearly feel that his sword technique had improved in the past 20 days. Chu Mu nodded. He had a bit of appreciation for this person. In fact, someone like him who persevered and was able to keep fighting despite repeated defeats. Chu Mu was certain that such a person would be able to achieve great things in the future. As for some people, after being defeated by his sword several times, they would lose the courage to go on stage. Below the stage, many disciples from the 3 halls and the main hall had complicated expressions. They couldn't find any words to express the admiration and respect they felt for this inner disciple who had been on the stage for 30 days. They could only look up to a tall mountain. Many female disciples didn't hide their admiration at all. From time to time, they would throw coquettish glances at Chu Mu. This Chu Mu. Attendant Chun Jin's face was solemn as he thought to himself, after today, he'll be on the stage for 30 days. Since the founding of the Azure Edge Sword sect, the longest time a disciple has been on the stage is 30 days. Is there going to be another disciple who can break this record? Moreover, if we don't talk about time and instead talk about the number of sword fights, Chu Mu has already far surpassed the previous stage defenders. 1,000 consecutive victories. Chun Jin was incomparably shocked. He was the attendant of the sword battle arena, and he was here every day to watch Chu Mu accept challenges from one disciple after another. Every disciple wasn't a match for Chu Mu's sword. One after another, they would come up. Unknowingly, in the past 30 days, Chu Mu had already fought and won 1,000 battles. Thinking of this, Chun Jin felt a bit dizzy. It was as if he was too tired from practicing the sword and couldn't see anything real. "Thank you for your guidance, Senior Brother Chu." Although this disciple of the Blue Water Academy had been defeated by Chu Mu in a single strike, he didn't look dejected in the slightest. Instead, he excitedly saluted Chu Mu. "I feel like I've reached a bottleneck in my swordsmanship, but thanks to Senior Brother Chu's guidance, I've been able to comprehend something. I should be able to break through in a few days. At that time, I'll come back to ask Senior Brother for guidance." Now, whether it was the disciples of the 3 academies or the main hall, whether they were at 7th or 8th level, as long as they had fought against Chu Mu and watched Chu Mu's sword fights many times, they were all convinced that Chu Mu was Senior Brother. In their eyes, Chu Mu was already the undisputed number 1 disciple of the Qingfeng sword sect in terms of swordsmanship. At this time, the sky was getting dark. Once the sun set, Chu Mu would be considered to have finished guarding the sword platform. After 30 days, he would be able to obtain the 6th Qi refining pill. Chu Mu had already consumed and digested the 5 Qi cultivating pills he had previously obtained. Adding on a month of bitter training, his sword aura cultivation had increased from the early 7th phase to the late 7th phase, nearing the peak. If he had another Qi refining pill, Chu Mu would be able to reach the peak of 7th level. To Chu Mu, obtaining the 6th Qi refining pill wasn't difficult at all. At this time, two people quickly flew over from the distance. One was dressed in blue and the other in white. Their robes fluttered in the wind, making them seem like immortals. It's Senior Sister Luo. Senior Sister Luo is here. The disciples of the main hall were all excited when they saw her. Their eyes were filled with deep admiration. The disciples of the 3 academies were also attracted. Immediately, the male disciples were stunned. Some of the female disciples were ashamed of their inferiority, while others were jealous. Chumu looked over. Even with his willpower and temperament, he couldn't help but be stunned. This woman's appearance was something that Chumu had never seen in the past few decades. Only some of the modified beauties on the internet could compare. However, those beauties were fake after all. They lacked vitality and couldn't be compared to the real person. Her face was very delicate. Her skin was delicate and white like cream. When her facial features were pieced together, not only did she have a stunning beauty, but she also had a heroic spirit that made people's eyes light up. As the female disciple approached, a feminine fragrance wafted over. The female disciple didn't stop. When she approached the sword platform, she leaped over everyone's heads like a swallow returning to its nest. She shuttled back and forth, and a mesmerizing fragrance wafted over. She gently and steadily landed on the battle arena, displaying her top-notch movement skills. The male disciple behind him shot out like an arrow from a bow. As he approached the arena, he made a sharp turn and landed steadily at the edge of the arena. He was like a long spear, his aura sharp and threatening. Good movement technique. It's at least a mid-level movement technique. Chumu's eyes flashed as he thought to himself. You're Chumu. It's said that you're the best swordsman in the 3 academies. You even claim to be the best swordsman in the Qingfeng sword sect. The female disciple's full red lips parted slightly. Her voice was crisp and gentle. Even if it was a stern question, it was still pleasant to the ears. It was intoxicating. Looking at the male disciples of the 3 academies and the main hall, most of them were intoxicated. They couldn't wait to hear the words being said to them. Tell me your name, Chumu said faintly. He had long known that the so-called first place would bring him some trouble. However, this kind of thing couldn't be clarified. The more one tried to clarify it, the worse it would be. It would make others think that he was a hypocrite who didn't dare to admit it. Therefore, Chumu's attitude had always been to neither admit nor deny it. They could say whatever they wanted. Chumu's words and tone were like he was talking to a normal challenger. This caused the disciples of the 3 academies and the main palace to all reveal shocked expressions. They couldn't describe what they were feeling. It seemed that they worshipped Chumu even more. Facing a goddess like Senior Sister Luo, he could still be so calm. However, they also felt a little depressed. They felt very uncomfortable that Senior Sister Luo, who was like a goddess in their hearts, was treated so coldly by Chumu. The female disciples all revealed expressions of adoration. Their adoration for Chumu was as hot as fire. As for the cold and threatening male disciple on the side of the stage, his eyebrows were tightly furrowed as a sliver of unhappiness flashed across his face. I'm Luo Yuling, a disciple of the main hall. The female disciple's attitude towards Chumu was clearly very surprised. All the male disciples she met, after seeing her, would either shamelessly greet her, pretend to be indifferent and ignore her to attract her attention, or use various methods to get close to her, etc. However, the indifference of the person in front of her made her feel that it was not an act. It was a kind of natural instinct that came from the bottom of his heart. Because of this, Luo Yuling was angry that he dared to ignore her. Her voice became colder and colder, and there was a trace of arrogance in it. I'm known as the best swordsman among the disciples of the main hall. You're known as the best swordsman among the disciples of the 3 academies. Today, I'll show you that the 3 academies are inferior to the disciples of the main hall. Even though you're the best swordsman, you're still no match for me. Hearing this, Chumu was a little surprised. The best swordsman among the disciples of the main hall? If it was true, then this female disciple's swordsmanship must be quite accomplished. Inevitably, Chu Mu was a little expectant. Incomparable respect and admiration appeared in the eyes of the male disciples below. However, Chu Mu did not see that when the male disciple at the edge of the platform heard that Luo Yuling claimed to be the best swordsman among the disciples of the main hall, a strange look flashed across his face. The disciples below were both expectant and conflicted. On one hand, they hoped to see their goddess display her invincible power and defeat Chu Mu. On the other hand, they did not want Chu Mu to be defeated. On the other hand, they did not want Chu Mu to win. They thought that it would be better to have a draw. On the other hand, they wished that they could replace Chu Mu and fight Luo Yuling. Even if they were defeated and injured in the end, they would be willing to do so. Chapter 52. The disciples of the main palace had always been more outstanding than the disciples of the three courtyards. This had been proven many times. Therefore, it was extremely difficult to become the number one disciple of the main palace. Think about it, the main palace's faction was the same as the three academies. They had 7th and 8th phase disciples, and even 9th phase elite disciples. Most of these elite disciples were promoted from the three academies, and each one of them had extraordinary sword skills. To be able to stand out among the inner disciples and elite disciples and become the number one in sword skills, her sword skills must be very profound. She was definitely above all the disciples of the three courtyards except for Chu Mu. Chu Mu couldn't help but look forward to it. I have cultivated the intermediate level sword skill, Rainstorm Sword Art. Next, I will use the Rainstorm Sword Art to defeat you. I will let you know that being the number one disciple of the sword faction is just a fantasy for you. The three courtyards will always be inferior to our main palace. Luo Yuling shouted. With a clang, she pulled out the unsharpened 100 refined sword she had just received and pointed it at Chu Mu. The sword aura was swift and fierce, surging like a storm towards Chu Mu. No matter how strong you are, I will not move. Luo Yuling saw that Chu Mu wasn't affected in the slightest. She let out a cold shout and drew her sword. Each strike was incomparably fast. Sword shadows crisscrossed like a storm, enveloping Chu Mu's entire body. Sister Luo's sword skills are so high. Yeah, I heard that Sister Luo's Rainstorm Sword Art has already reached Deshang's level. Once she uses it, her sword will not stop like a storm. It is so dense that no one can dodge it. I can't even withstand one attack from such a dense attack. She is indeed the number one disciple of the main palace. I wonder how Brother Chu will deal with it. Chu Mu's eyebrows creased slightly. He felt the storm of swords charging towards him and felt the flow of air within. His body naturally reacted and he used wind travel. He was like a fallen leaf in a violent storm, dancing left and right. What an exquisite movement technique! Chen Jin and Wenren Yun both revealed a wisp of surprise as they spoke in their hearts. Luo Yuling gritted her teeth, and her sword energy surged. She didn't hold back her late-stage 8th phase sword energy. Her sword speed became faster, and the sword shadows became denser. Every sword seemed to tear through the air, creating a chi-chi sound. The sword seemed to have disappeared. Between heaven and earth, there was only a torrential downpour that enveloped Chu Mu. Chu Mu's figure changed, faster and faster, but he didn't lose his composure. Somewhat disappointed, Chu Mu said softly, "If you are the number one swordsman among the disciples of the main palace, I can only say that the swordsmanship of the disciples of the main palace is too weak." Chu Mu's words almost made Luo Yuling vomit blood. This was the first time someone had dared to say such things to her. She secretly hardened her heart and stopped her sword. In a split second, all the sword shadows exploded in the midst of the sword light, transforming into raindrops that surrounded Chu Mu from all directions and rushed towards him. Torrential slaughter. He executed the strongest killing move of the Rainstorm swordsmanship in anger. Chu Mu had nowhere to dodge. The disciples below the sword platform were shocked and held their breath. Wenren Yun sneered and looked at Chu Mu with pity. Even if he didn't die after being hit by this killing move, he would be seriously injured. However, even if he died, so what? He was just an inner disciple of the three houses. Chu Mu's figure paused, and he casually slashed out with his sword. White clouds rotated and exploded. Sword chi cut, collided, and cancelled each other out. It was the shocking cloud slaughter. Luo Yuling looked as if she had seen a ghost. She couldn't believe that the torrential slaughter she was so proud of was broken just like that. Wenren Yun was also surprised. If this is your swordsmanship, then there is no need to continue. You can go down, Chu Mu said. Do you think you can make me admit defeat by blocking one of my killing moves? Luo Yuling was filled with hatred. She shouted, "Take this!" As soon as he finished speaking, the sword light flickered and the sword shadows turned into a torrential rain. Chu Mu faintly shook his head and casually swung his sword. With a turn of the sword and a thrust, the torrential rain dissipated. Chu Mu's sword was pressed against Luo Yuling's throat. Luo Yuling's beautiful eyes widened, filled with disbelief and shock. I'm afraid your so-called #1 swordsmanship among the main palace disciples was given to you by someone else. Chu Mu said indifferently and sheathed his sword. When Luo Yuling heard this, her heart was filled with grievance. She angrily harumphed and threw the 100 refined sword to the side. She flew up and, without looking back, flew out of the sword fighting platform. She quickly left. Chu Mu saw a drop of tear fall on the edge of the sword fighting platform. Junior sister. Junior sister. Wenren Yun turned pale with fright and hurriedly shouted. However, Luo Yuling ignored her and left without looking back. Chu Mu looked at the 100 refined sword that was thrown to the side and frowned slightly. The concept of a swordsman was that the sword was a loyal companion. Although it might not be loyal to the end, unless forced to, it would not be taken the initiative to throw it away. But Luo Yuling's current actions caused Chu Mu's impression of her to drop by 3 points. A swordsman was like a swordsman. The sword was a companion. Abandoning the sword just because of a defeat, such a person was not worthy of being called a swordsman. Chu Mu, you actually let junior sister Luo suffer grievances. Wenren Yun angrily rushed towards Chu Mu and flew onto the arena. His face was cold and sinister, and his eyes revealed a fierce light. Do you know that we usually hold her in the palm of our hands and carefully protect her, not letting her feel the slightest bit wronged? But today, not only did you make her feel wronged, you even made her cry. I will absolutely not forgive you. As he spoke, a fierce killing intent swept out from Wenren Yun's body, and a powerful sword chi cultivation was revealed. The sword chi moved horizontally and vertically, wreaking havoc on the sword discourse arena. It was incomparably powerful. Chu Mu's expression changed slightly as he became vigilant. What a powerful sword chi cultivation, it has already surpassed the 8th stage. Chu Mu thought. That's right, Wenren Yun's sword chi cultivation was at the middle stage of the 9th stage. The expressions of the disciples below the stage changed drastically as they hurriedly retreated. With a clang, Wenren Yun drew his sword. The 100 refined sword was filled with killing intent as it pounced towards Chu Mu. A bloody and fierce aura assaulted him. I'll give you a chance. I'll bring junior sister Luo over. You must kowtow to junior sister Luo and admit your wrongs. Wenren Yun's voice was incomparably cold. Otherwise, I'll let you know that no matter how brilliant your sword arts are, no matter how enormous the difference in sword chi cultivation is, you're just an ant in front of it. Of course, you can rest assured that I won't kill you, but I'll cut off the tendons in your hands so that you'll never be able to practice the sword again. You think too highly of yourself, Chu Mu said without fear. The peak of the 8th stage was already not his match. Chu Mu had never fought a 9th stage sword cultivator before. At this moment, his heart was boiling with excitement. The sword in his hand was trembling, and his battle intent was bursting forth. Facing Wenren Yun's powerful aura, Chu Mu's mind was highly concentrated. The edge of the sword appeared, and he pressed forward courageously without fear. Faintly, Chu Mu felt that he was about to enter the state he was in when he faced Wang Feng in the outer sect. Sword force. Wenren Yun, you're too presumptuous. Could it be that you want to violate the sect's rules? An explosive shout resounded, making people's ears buzz and dizzy. A figure shot over like a sharp sword, and landed beside Chu Mu. It was the deacon Chen Jin. He stared at Wenren Yun with a stern expression, and dispersed Wenren Yun's fierce aura. Deacon Chen, I advise you to stay out of this matter. Wenren Yun's face sank. Stay out of this matter? Chen Jin sneered. I'm the deacon of the sword battle arena. Everything in the sword battle arena is under my control. Even the headmaster can't violate the rules of the sword battle arena. You're just an elite disciple of the main palace, and you want to challenge the sect's rules? Moreover, as an elite disciple of the main palace, you actually have to attack a disciple of one of the 3 intersections. Could it be that you don't feel ashamed? Good, using the sect's rules to pressure me? Indeed, I don't dare to violate the sect's rules. Wenren Yun was so angry that he laughed. He sheathed his sword and looked from Chen Jin's face to Chu Mu's. His killing intent was hidden deep within. He said in a threatening tone, dealing with you is indeed beneath my status. I'll wait for you in the main palace. When you become an elite disciple of the main palace, I'll personally teach you what to pay attention to as a new elite disciple. Of course, if you can't become an elite disciple, then you're just a piece of trash. You don't even have the qualifications to be remembered by me. As she spoke, Wenren Yun tapped the ground, and then she flashed out like an arrow that had left the bow. Chapter 53. While Chu Mu was dominating the arena, the 3 courtyards were in a storm. The swordsmanship of the inner disciple of Qin Feng's sword sect is only so. I'm really disappointed. Elder Yaori shook his head. Disappointment was written all over his old face. This was the grassland outside the steel of the Soaring Wind courtyard. Many people were gathered there, including the disciples of the Thunder courtyard, the Blue Water courtyard, and the Soaring Wind courtyard. In addition, an elder of the Soaring Wind courtyard was among them. Hearing Elder Yaori's words, the disciples of the 3 courtyards and Elder Lin of Lingfeng courtyard revealed an angry expression. Elder is right. We have already swept through Jadewater courtyard and Thunder courtyard. Now we will sweep through Lingfeng courtyard. Su Qilai echoed with a smile. I believe that under Elder's leadership, Senior Brother Huolong will be able to sweep through all the disciples of Lingfeng courtyard and point his sword at Qinfeng main palace. Su Huolong stood in the open space with the 100 refined sword in his hand. His face was indifferent, but there was a trace of arrogance in his eyes. His eyes were filled with disdain when he glanced at the disciples of the 3 courtyards of Qinfeng's sword sect. After a month, Su Huolong, who lost under Chu Mu's sword, not only broke through to the 7th stage of the Sword Qi realm, under Elder Glorious Sun's wholehearted nurturing, he took a huge step forward and reached the 8th stage of the Sword Qi realm. Moreover, under Elder Yao Ri's guidance and his own talent, his swordsmanship attainment had improved significantly. After losing his beloved disciple, Elder Yao Ri took Su Huolong's talent in swordsmanship as his last disciple and nurtured him wholeheartedly. Out of a sense of superiority, Elder Yao Ri brought Su Huolong to Qinshui's sword sect. After sweeping through all the level 7 and level 8 inner disciples of Qinshui's sword sect, he came to Qinfeng's sword sect and swept through almost all the level 7 and level 8 inner disciples of Jadewater courtyard and Thunder courtyard. He was about to sweep through Lingfeng courtyard. Damn it! If Senior Brother He Kaming was still in our Thunder Sound Academy, he would definitely not allow Su Huolong to be so arrogant. He would definitely be able to defeat Su Huolong. An inner disciple of Thunder Sound Academy clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. That's right. Unfortunately, Brother He Kaming broke through to 9th stage half a month ago and has become an elite disciple of the main hall. Otherwise, this Qinlan disciple wouldn't have the chance to be arrogant here. Who else has the guts to fight me? Su Hualong's eyes, which were as sharp as swords, carried a hint of arrogance as he slowly swept his gaze across the faces of the inner disciples of the three academies. His gaze was so sharp that the disciples of the three academies did not dare to look him in the eye. Ha ha! Senior Brother Hualong, the disciples of the three academies of Qinfeng Sword Sect are all trash. They don't even have the guts to look you in the eye, let alone fight you. Such disciples wouldn't even be qualified to sweep the floor in our sect. Su Qilai laughed and continued to attack the disciples of the three academies of Qinfeng Sword Sect with his words. Elder Yao Ri's face was indifferent as he stood aside and smiled without saying a word. The disciples of the three academies were once again enraged. One by one, they looked at Su Qilai. Their eyes were as sharp as swords, full of anger, as if they were going to shoot Su Qilai to death. Su Qilai was shocked and subconsciously took a step back. Immediately, aware of his own actions, Su Qilai's face flushed red and he became angry. He shouted, "What are you looking at? I'm talking to you. If you have the ability, draw your sword and fight with Senior Brother Hualong. If you don't have the ability, then get lost and obediently be trashed." Elder Yao Ri, the words of this disciple of your sect are too extreme. Elder Lin's face was dark as he said in a low voice. It's inevitable for a young man to be impulsive. Elder Yao Ri was secretly happy, but on the surface, he was very indifferent. Moreover, it's just a few words. It's not a big deal. Moreover, what he said is mostly the truth. This kind of disciple will not use flowery words to deceive others. He is more worthy of encouragement. The conduct of a disciple is related to the reputation of the sword faction. What do you think, Elder Lin? Elder Yao Ri's words twisted the truth and made Elder Lin tremble in anger. The disciples of the three academies were even more furious. Li Yang was among the crowd. However, he was just an ordinary member now. After seeing Su Hualong's sword technique, he knew that the gap between him and Su Hualong was getting bigger and bigger. Let me. A middle-stage, 8th-stage disciple of the Soaring Wind Courtyard pulled out his sword and strode forward. He pointed his sword at Su Hualong and said, "Take my sword. Not to mention one sword, I'll take 10 or 100 swords. I'm just afraid that you don't have the ability," Su Hualong said proudly. Looking at the sharp sword that was thrusting towards him, a trace of contempt flashed across his eyes. He moved his head and dodged the sword. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The middle-stage 8th-stage disciple of the Soaring Wind Courtyard attacked faster than the previous. It was the basic move of the Soaring Wind sword technique. However, Su Hualong was able to dodge easily, causing the disciple's sword to hit empty air. Is this the sword technique of the inner disciples of the Soaring Wind Courtyard? It's really disappointing. Su Hualong dodged the sword once again and said faintly, "Take my sword too." After saying that, he attacked with his sword. A bright sword light flashed across the sky like a rainbow. With a clang, the opponent's sword was pushed away and the sword was thrust forward, stopping at the disciple's throat. Ever since he was defeated by Chu Mu's sword, Su Hualong subconsciously liked to do this. I've said that I'll sweep through the 3 inner courtyards of the Qinfeng Sword Sect. I, Su Hualong, am a man of my words. Su Hualong sheathed his sword and said proudly. The expression of the inner disciple of the Soaring Wind Courtyard changed from green to red to white. Don't be complacent. When Senior Brother Chu returns, you'll know what failure is. The disciple snorted coldly. That's right. When Senior Brother Chu returns, you'll know that your sword technique is nothing. Immediately, another disciple of the 3 courtyards echoed. That's right. He's not a match for Senior Brother Chu. Even Senior Brother, he couldn't defeat Senior Brother Chu. Where did Senior Brother Chu go? Who knows? Hurry up and find Senior Brother Chu. I heard that Senior Brother Chu went to the sword battle arena. Hurry up and find him. Su Hualong's eyes flashed with a trace of gloominess. The words "Senior Brother Chu" gave him a very uncomfortable feeling. More than a month ago, when he swept through the outer courtyard of the Qingfeng sword sect, he was disrupted by a person with the surname Chu. Moreover, Chu Mu defeated him with a single sword. Su Hualong would wake up from his dreams almost every day because Chu Mu's sword had left a shadow in his heart. This time, other than sweeping through the 3 courtyards, his other purpose in coming to the Qingfeng sword sect was to wipe away his shame and defeat Chu Mu. My current cultivation is at the early stage of the 8th stage of the sword chi realm. My sword technique has obviously improved a lot compared to a month ago. I can even fight against someone at the late stage of the 8th stage of the sword chi realm. Su Hualong said to himself. As for Chu Mu, his cultivation was not even at the peak of the 6th stage a month ago. After more than a month, he's at most at the 7th stage. The gap between the 7th and 8th stage is huge. He's not a match for me. Hearing the words of the crowd, Elder Lin's eyes lit up. He had a deep impression of Chu Mu. Elder Yao Ri, since you've brought your newly recruited disciple to challenge our Qingfeng sword sect and declared that you're going to sweep through the 3 courtyards of our sect, do you dare to make a bet with me? Elder Lin thought for a moment and said in an arrogant tone, "If you don't dare, take your disciple and scram now. From now on, don't step into our Qingfeng sword sect." Why wouldn't I dare? Elder Yao Ri couldn't stand being provoked. He glared at Elder Lin and a scorching heat spread out from his body like the sun. "All right." Elder Lin laughed. "Your disciple's swordsmanship is indeed good. I admit that none of the disciples here are a match for him. However, there's a disciple in our courtyard who can defeat your disciple. Do you believe it?" "Oh ha ha ha. There's a disciple in the Soaring Wind courtyard who can defeat my disciple. Call him out and let me broaden my horizons." Elder Yao Ri naturally didn't believe it, and there was a hint of contempt in his tone. Su Hualong felt increasingly uncomfortable while Su Qilai fell into deep thought. "Very well. Since Elder Yao Ri is so confident, let's wait for a while." Elder Lin laughed and pointed at the 2 disciples beside him. "You two, go to the battle arena and bring Chu Mu here." "Yes, Elder." The 2 disciples were unusually excited. They channeled their sword chi into their feet and executed their movement skills. They quickly ran towards the battle arena, leaving behind a trail of dust. "Elder!" Su Qilai suddenly called out in a low voice. Only he and Elder Yao Ri could hear it. "What's the matter?" Elder Yao Ri frowned slightly and looked at Su Qilai. "Elder, it's like this," Su Qilai said. "More than a month ago, when Senior Hualong was still an outer disciple, he challenged Qing Shui's sword sect's outer disciple and Qingfeng sword sect's outer disciple. It was about to end, but in the end, an outer disciple named Chu Mu appeared and defeated Senior Hualong with a single stroke. Therefore, Senior Hualong followed you to challenge the 3 courtyards of Qingfeng sword sect with the intention of looking for Chu Mu to avenge his humiliation. Hualong was defeated by a single stroke more than a month ago? Elder Yao Ri found it unbelievable. Soon after, he nodded confidently. "That was more than a month ago. In the past month, under my guidance and Hualong's extraordinary talent in swordsmanship, his attainment in swordsmanship has improved by leaps and bounds. It's good that Chu Mu doesn't come. Once he comes, he will be defeated by Hualong's swordsmanship and will never be able to turn the tables." Elder is right. Su Qilai's doubts completely disappeared. "Elder Yao Ri, since we want to bet, there must be a wager." Elder Lin continued to smile as if victory was already in his hands. "I bet that Chu Mu will defeat Su Hualong. If you lose, not only will you have to take back your words, you will also have to apologize to us with a sword salute." It was extremely difficult for an unreasonable person like Elder Yao Ri to apologize with a sword salute, especially when the target of the apology was not only Elder Lin, but also the other disciples. It was even more impossible. "All right, I bet that Su Hualong will defeat Chu Mu. If you lose, you will admit that the 3 courtyards of Qingfeng Sword Sect are all trash. Elder Yao Ri was very confident in himself and Su Hualong. All right. Elder Lin was even more confident in Chu Mu. The wager was established. The disciples were extremely excited and looked forward to it. Chapter 54. The sun set in the west, leaving a touch of red on the horizon. The sky gradually darkened, and large gusts of cold wind blew, causing people's black hair to dance and their clothes to flutter. Congratulations, Chu Mu. You've created a record that can be considered impossible. Chen Jin's eyes flickered as he stared at Chu Mu. He smiled from the bottom of his heart. You are the second disciple of the Qingfeng Sword Sect to guard the sword platform for 30 days. You are qualified to leave your name at the top of the battle sword tablet. This is an honor that belongs to you. Who was the first? Chu Mu was not very excited. He asked indifferently. It was Patriarch Luo Qinglin. Chen Jin said with a face full of admiration and longing. He was extremely excited. Chu Mu nodded. He did not have any impression of Luo Qinglin. After all, he was the Patriarch. He did not know how many years ago. Chu Mu's indifference made Chen Jin unable to vent his excitement. He had no target. In the end, he resentfully took out a small porcelain bottle and handed it to Chu Mu. This is what you deserve. Chen Jin threw the porcelain bottle to Chu Mu and spoke in a slightly unhappy tone. Chu Mu smiled and took the porcelain bottle. Inside was a qi cultivating pill. He turned around and left a sentence, I won't be coming back tomorrow. Not coming tomorrow? Then you have given up on the sword platform. Chen Jin looked at Chu Mu's back and repeated to himself. He looked a little regretful. What a pity. I was looking forward to you surpassing Patriarch Luo Qinglin's record. Oh right, I forgot to tell him Luo Yuling's identity. This qi training pill is enough for me to reach the peak of the 7th phase. Next, I will use a few days to consolidate and refine my sword qi. Then I will prepare to break through the bottleneck and reach the 8th phase. Chu Mu put away the porcelain bottle and slowly displayed his body movement in the wind. His figure drifted in the direction of the towering wind courtyard. Directly in front of him were 2 disciples madly sprinting towards Chu Mu, bringing with them gusts of wind. Chu Mu's body moved with the wind and naturally dodged the 2 disciples. Wait, that seems to be Senior Brother Chu. One of the disciples suddenly stopped and turned around. He suddenly realized something and quickly shouted, Senior Brother Chu, wait! Chu Mu stopped in his tracks. He was like a falling leaf, drifting down naturally. There was an indescribable charm to him. Senior Brother Chu, we've finally found you. The 2 disciples gasped for breath. What is it? Chu Mu's expression was indifferent. Senior Brother Chu, there is something very important. Elder Lin asked us to look for you. It's like this, Senior Brother Chu. This disciple spoke a few simple sentences and explained the course of events. A glint flashed through Chu Mu's eyes. The sun set in the west, leaving a touch of red on the horizon. The sky gradually darkened, and large gusts of cold wind blew, causing people's black hair to dance and their clothes to flutter. Congratulations, Chu Mu. You've created a record that can be considered impossible. Chen Jin's eyes flickered as he stared at Chu Mu. He smiled from the bottom of his heart. You are the second disciple of the Qingfeng Sword Sect to guard the sword platform for 30 days. You are qualified to leave your name at the top of the battle sword tablet. This is an honor that belongs to you. Who was the first? Chu Mu was not very excited. He asked indifferently. It was Patriarch Luo Qinglin. Chen Jin said with a face full of admiration and longing. He was extremely excited. Chu Mu nodded. He did not have any impression of Luo Qinglin. After all, he was the Patriarch. He did not know how many years ago. Chu Mu's indifference made Chen Jin unable to vent his excitement. He had no target. In the end, he resentfully took out a small porcelain bottle and handed it to Chu Mu. "This is what you deserve." Chen Jin threw the porcelain bottle to Chu Mu and spoke in a slightly unhappy tone. Chu Mu smiled and took the porcelain bottle. Inside was a qi cultivating pill. He turned around and left a sentence, "I won't be coming back tomorrow." "Not coming tomorrow? Then you have given up on the sword platform." Chen Jin looked at Chu Mu's back and repeated to himself. He looked a little regretful. "What a pity. I was looking forward to you surpassing Patriarch Luo Qinglin's record. Oh right, I forgot to tell him Luo Yulink's identity. This qi training pill is enough for me to reach the peak of the 7th phase. Next, I will use a few days to consolidate and refine my sword qi. Then I will prepare to break through the bottleneck and reach the 8th phase." Chu Mu put away the porcelain bottle and slowly displayed his body movement in the wind. His figure drifted in the direction of the towering wind courtyard. Directly in front of him were 2 disciples madly sprinting towards Chu Mu, bringing with them gusts of wind. Chu Mu's body moved with the wind and naturally dodged the 2 disciples. "Wait, that seems to be Senior Brother Chu." One of the disciples suddenly stopped and turned around. He suddenly realized something and quickly shouted, "Senior Brother Chu, wait!" Chu Mu stopped in his tracks. He was like a falling leaf, drifting down naturally. There was an indescribable charm to him. "Senior Brother Chu, we've finally found you." The 2 disciples gasped for breath. "What is it?" Chu Mu's expression was indifferent. "Senior Brother Chu, there is something very important. Elder Lin asked us to look for you." "It's like this, Senior Brother Chu." This disciple spoke a few simple sentences and explained the course of events. A glint flashed through Chu Mu's eyes. He turned around and used the wind travel movement technique. Like a gust of wind, he left in the blink of an eye. As expected of Senior Brother Chu, even his body movement is so exquisite. Once Senior Brother Chu makes a move, the opponent will lose without a doubt. Let's go. We can't miss such a wonderful scene. When will that disciple named Chu Mu arrive? It's late now. I have to return to the Qinglan sword sect for dinner. Elder Yao Ri was a little impatient. "I think you'd better admit defeat obediently. Don't waste my time." "Are you afraid?" Elder Lin narrowed his eyes and said casually. "What? Afraid? Since when have I been afraid?" After being provoked, Elder Yao Ri's eyes widened again. A breath as hot as the sun spread out from his body, dispelling the chill in the wind. The heat wave hit. "Hualong, go all out later. Let them know that the swordsmanship of the disciples of Qinglan sword sect is beyond their reach." "Yes, Master." Su Hualong replied firmly. "He's here. Senior Brother Chu is here." A sharp-eyed disciple shouted loudly. His hands were dancing and his cheeks were flushed. He was very excited. "He's here. Senior Brother Chu is finally back. Great. Now that Senior Brother Chu is here, let's see how arrogant you can be." Whether it was the disciples of Rumbling Thunder Courtyard, Jadewater Courtyard, or Soaring Wind Courtyard, all of them were excited. Now in their hearts, Chu Mu was a kind of spiritual sustenance, their last reliance, and their spiritual faith. "He's finally here." Elder Lin smiled and nodded secretly. Chu Mu quickly rushed over and saluted Elder Lin with his sword. "So you're Chu Mu. Why don't you use the sword greeting when you see this elder? Could it be that Qingfeng sword sect taught you this way? Not differentiating between seniors and juniors?" Elder Yao Ri's eyes shot out a scarlet light. His scorching gaze was like a sword that shot towards Chu Mu. This kind of gaze and aura seemed to be melting Chu Mu. Su Qilai was shocked and subconsciously took 2 steps back. The disciples next to Chu Mu were even more shocked. They could not bear it and retreated one after another. Elder Lin's face changed and was about to make a move. "If it's someone worthy of respect, I will naturally salute," Chu Mu said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Although Elder Yao Ri's gaze was sharp and brought great pressure to Chu Mu, for Chu Mu who had experienced the sword aura of the Sword Pavilion elders, it was not enough to make Chu Mu retreat. Well said. Elder Lin was happy, as if he had drunk iced sour plum soup on a hot day. Elder Yao Ri was so angry that his face turned red. He almost could not help but cripple Chu Mu. Wasn't Chu Mu insinuating that he was not worthy of respect? Good, you're really sharp-tongued. I hope your sword skills can be as sharp. Elder Yao Ri took a few deep breaths and suppressed his anger. His voice was cold and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. Hualong, don't hold back. Yes, master. Su Hualong understood that Elder Yao Ri wanted to cripple Chu Mu. Chu Mu's rebuttal had completely angered Elder Yao Ri. Chu Mu, I thought you wouldn't dare to come. Su Hualong looked straight at Chu Mu. His gaze was as sharp as a sword and his voice was cold. Today, I will return a sword strike to you and wipe away my previous humiliation. I understand. So this Su Hualong was defeated by Senior Brother Chu. Don't you know? When Senior Brother Chu was still in the outer sect, he once defeated Su Hualong with a single sword strike. Oh, no wonder. He actually wants to wipe away his previous humiliation. Let me tell you, it's impossible. If he fights with Senior Brother Chu, he will only be humiliated again. The words of the disciples of the 3 courtyards almost made Su Hualong vomit blood. He was even more furious. I will only use one sword strike, Chu Mu said. When Su Hualong heard this, he felt that these words were so familiar. Suddenly, he recalled the scene from a month ago. The mouthful of blood that he had suppressed surged up his throat and almost spurted out. After a while, Su Hualong finally swallowed this mouthful of blood back down. He stared at Chu Mu, his 100 refined sword's edge threatening as he sternly said, Chu Mu, the current me is no longer the me of the past. Not only is my sword aura cultivation many times stronger, my sword technique attainments have also increased by a lot. Let me tell you, you better kneel down and admit defeat now. Otherwise, my sword doesn't have eyes. When the time comes, you will lose all your face. Don't regret it. Make your move. Compared to Su Hualong's arrogant threat, Chu Mu seemed very calm. The contrast was huge, making people feel that Su Hualong was like a clown. The light red sword qi circulated and attached to the blade. Heat waves rolled. When the sword was drawn, it was like a stream of fire, evaporating all the water in the surroundings and drying up all the vitality. Intermediate swordsmanship, flowing fire swordsmanship. One sword strike after another turned into streams of fire and attack. The temperature in the air rose, making people feel stuffy and thirsty. It was as if it had turned from November evening to July noon. Everyone turned pale with fright. Elder Lin's eyes narrowed while Elder Yao Ri revealed a smug expression. He nodded secretly as if he was affirming Su Hualong's swordsmanship. Chu Mu's eyes were sharp, and he could see every sword clearly. His footsteps moved, and as light as a feather, he dodged one sword after another. The heat from each sword didn't affect Chu Mu at all. Although the first layer of sword qi protection secret art couldn't block the direct attack of the 100 refinements sword, it could isolate the heat and remain unaffected. Impossible! Su Hualong couldn't believe it. The flowing fire swordsmanship was taught to him by Elder Yao Ri. Elder Yao Ri gave him wholeheartedly, allowing him to get close to Deshang within a month. The specialty of the flowing fire swordsmanship was that every sword strike was like a stream of fire. Even if it didn't hit the target, it would cause the temperature in the air to rise continuously. It would make people feel stuffy and hot, irritated, thus revealing their flaws. However, Chu Mu wasn't affected at all. Instead, he looked as if he was bathing in a cool breeze with a leisurely expression. Chu Mu's body movement technique is so profound. Elder Yao Ri frowned. Your swordsmanship has indeed improved a lot compared to a month ago. However, it's still not enough for me. It's still too weak. Chu Mu said softly as he dodged Su Hualong's fire-like sword strikes. This made Su Hualong restless. Soon after, Chu Mu drew his sword. There was a clanging sound that was like the sound of metal from outer space. It reverberated through the heavens and earth. A snow-white radiance shot out sharply under the dusk. It was like an aurora splitting the sky. It was like a gust of wind blowing. Su Hualong squinted his eyes unconsciously. His hand paused as he felt his sword being pushed away. He then felt a piercing pain in his throat. Chu Mu's sword was pressed against Su Hualong's throat. Su Hualong unconsciously opened his arms. As the wind blew, his black hair fluttered. This scene was like an imprint in the wind. Chapter 55. The sky had darkened and the wind was chilly. However, Su Hualong's heart was even colder. It was so cold that he shivered as if he was about to freeze. A shadow was growing in the depths of his heart and it quickly expanded and spread. He was disheartened. After practicing hard for more than a month, his cultivation base and swordsmanship had improved tremendously. He wanted to avenge his humiliation. However, not only did he fail to avenge his humiliation, he was defeated again. He was defeated by a sword and there was a red mark on his throat. Chu Mu glanced at Su Hualong and saw the gloominess in his eyes. He knew that if there were no accidents, Su Hualong would be depressed because of the heavy blow. Eventually, he would be annihilated by the crowd. Sheathing his sword, Chu Mu turned around without saying a word. Elder Yao Ri stared at Chu Mu. His eyes narrowed slightly and there was a murderous intent in them. This boy's cultivation base is only at the late stage of the 7th stage of the sword chi realm. However, his swordsmanship is unpredictable. Even I was shocked by that sword. Elder Yao Ri muttered to himself, "This is almost impossible, but it's happening right in front of our eyes." This child's attainments in swordsmanship far exceed his cultivation level. Even a swordsman at the peak of stage 8 would not be his match. Once this boy's sword chi cultivation base reaches the 10th stage, he may be able to fight against an ordinary chi transformation realm. No, absolutely not. Such a disciple can only be in the Qinglan sword sect. If he is not a disciple of Qinglan, he must not be allowed to grow. Chu Mu, right? Your swordsmanship is indeed very good. Elder Yao Ri's murderous intent was restrained. He squeezed out a kind smile like a wolf. Come to the Qinglan sword sect. I can accept you as a pro-disciple and do my best to train you so that your sword chi cultivation base can reach the 10th stage within 2 years. Within 5 years, you can break through to the chi transformation realm. Elder Lin's face suddenly changed. He was very angry. How dare he poach Su Hualong so blatantly? He did not put the Qingfeng sword sect in his eyes. Elder Yao Ri, you are too presumptuous. This is not the Qinglan sword sect. Elder Lin shouted sternly as his eyes glowed. A strong gust of wind blew over, causing his black hair to flutter and his clothes to flutter. His aura was astonishing as it swept towards Elder Yao Ri. This place will belong to the Qinglan sword sect sooner or later. Elder Luminous Sun laughed out loud and a shocking red glow shot out from his eyes. Sword chi swirled around his body, red and hot. The air was scorched and the surrounding grass quickly withered. He was like a dazzling red sun, and Su Qilai retreated again and again. What do you mean by that? Can I take it that the Qinglan sword sect intends to wage a full-scale war with us? Elder Lin's face was gloomy, and the wind around him became stronger and stronger. The wind whistled as it blew, and the grass was broken. His tone became cold and sharp. I didn't say that. Elder Yaori laughed. His aura rose again, and the strong wind dissipated because of the scorching heat. He was not stupid. Although the Qinglan sword sect had always thought of itself as the orthodox sect of Qinglan Mountain, and had always wanted to subdue the Qingfeng sword sect and Qingshui sword sect, it was only an idea, and they had no intention of putting it into action. Therefore, if he admitted that the Qinglan sword sect intended to go to war with the Qingfeng sword sect, it would inevitably lead to a bloody conflict between the two major sword sections. The consequences were not something that an elder like him could bear. Cut the crap. Your disciple has been defeated. According to the bet, you have to apologize to us and leave our sword sect immediately. Elder Lin certainly did not want the two major sword sects to have a bloody conflict. The current Qingfeng sword sect was still a little weaker than the Qinglan sword sect. Apologize. Elder Yao Ri's lips curled into a sneer, and he looked at Chu Mu. You haven't answered my question. Do you want to leave the Qingfeng sword sect and come under my wing? You know, it is not easy to break through to the Qi transformation realm in 5 years. You haven't apologized yet. Chu Mu's eyes were calm as he said. Apologize? Ha 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 ha. Why should I apologize? Why should I apologize? Elder Yao Ri was very arrogant, and from his body, he exuded a stronger and hotter aura. Many of the disciples could not bear it, and they all backed away. Chu Mu also felt a scorching heat on his face, as if his whole body was close to a burning furnace. Sweat flowed out and he was very shocked. If you agree to a bet, you have to accept your loss. A person with a bad character, no matter how high his cultivation or how good his sword skills are, has no right to teach me. Chu Mu said lightly, and Elder Lin was immediately satisfied. Elder Yao Ri's face changed, and the killing intent that he had been hiding almost exploded. A mere disciple dares to teach me a lesson? Do you think that with your little sword skills, you have the right to make me apologize? Elder Yao Ri's voice was like a bell, and his whole body exuded a crimson light, like a raging fire, like a big fireball. That was how the name Yao Ri came to be. Right or wrong is in the heart of the people, Chu Mu replied, and moved closer to Elder Lin, away from Elder Yao Ri. Yao Ri, apologize immediately, and get out of the Qingfeng sword sect. Elder Lin was furious, and his aura was very sharp. The wind was like a blade circling around his body, and the sword on his back was vibrating slightly, making a soft sound, as if it was going to be unsheathed at any time. Do you want to start a fight with me? Come, I don't mind showing you the power of the Yao Ri sword technique. The sword on Elder Yao Ri's back was also vibrating, exuding a scorching heat, as if it was about to be unsheathed. When the surrounding disciples heard this, they were shocked, and they all backed away. The aura of the two elders was already unbearable, and they had no choice but to back away. If they were to fight, the aftershock of the sword qi would be enough to kill them. Even Chu Mu, who had an extremely strong will and the protection of the sword qi, had to back away. The aura of the two elders was too strong, too hot, and too strong. If you want to fight, there will be plenty of chances in the future. Elder Lin's aura weakened slightly, not because he was afraid, but because he was thinking about the disciples. This was because if they were to fight, the aftershock of the sword qi would be so strong that even a stage 10 sword qi realm cultivator wouldn't be able to withstand it, let alone these stage 7 and stage 8 disciples. I knew you wouldn't have the guts. Elder Yao Ri sneered. He knew Elder Lin's scruples, and if their positions were reversed, he would also hold back. This time, Hualong has indeed lost, but it doesn't count, because Hualong's flowing fire sword technique hasn't reached Deshang yet. When Hualong's flowing fire sword technique reaches Deshang's level, I will bring him to challenge him again. Shameless. Shameless to such an extent, he is already invincible. When the disciples of the 3 inner halls heard this, they were furious. They couldn't imagine how there could be such a shameless person who didn't admit his loss, and was even an elder of a sect. While looking down on Elder Yao Ri, Chu Mu was more vigilant. He looked down on Elder Yao Ri from the bottom of his heart, because he was too tasteless. However, it was also because of this that such people often didn't have much misgivings when doing things. Chu Mu believed that this time, he had offended Elder Yao Ri to the point of death. He would definitely remember this deeply in his heart. Fortunately, he was far away from Elder Yao Ri and close to Elder Lin. Otherwise, Elder Yao Ri might suddenly attack him because of this. In fact, Elder Yaori had planned to attack and kill or cripple Chu-Mu when he least expected it. However, Chu-Mu was too cunning. He actually stayed away from him and close to Elder Lin, and Elder Lin was very guarded against him, so he didn't have a chance. This elder will come again. Elder Yaori didn't seem to care about the whispers of the disciples. He took a deep look at Chu-Mu, and Chu-Mu felt as if he was being stared at by a ferocious wolf or a poisonous snake. He couldn't help but feel cold all over. Chu-Mu, not bad, very good, a very outstanding disciple. I hope that the next time I see you, you will still be around. You don't have to worry about me, I will always live well, Chu-Mu said. The cold feeling on his body disappeared, and Elder Yaori turned and left with some reluctance. Chapter 56. The sky was dark, the mountain wind was strong, and the chill was deep. Elder Yaori led Su Hualong and Su Qilai out of Qingfeng Sword Sect. They followed the rugged mountain path and headed towards Qinglan Sword Sect. Su Hualong did not say a word along the way. His face was gloomy and his eyes were lifeless. He had suffered a heavy blow. Elder Yaori glanced at him and was secretly angry. He valued Su Hualong's talent and wanted to nurture him well. But now, if he could not overcome this obstacle and break through the shadow in his heart, his life would be ruined. On the other hand, if he could break through the shadow in his heart, he would definitely have a new breakthrough and become stronger. However, he could only rely on himself. The help of external forces was very little. Hualong, that Chu-Mu's swordsmanship attainment is indeed extraordinary. Elder Yaori thought for a while and decided to help him as much as possible. There are two reasons why you lost. First, you cared too much about gains and losses, which led to your inability to bring out the best of your swordsmanship. Second, your flowing fire swordsmanship is not as powerful as Deshang's. The power that you could bring out is not even half of what it should be. Moreover, being defeated is nothing to a swordsman. No matter if it's once, twice, or 10 times, a true swordsman can only be as straight as a sword after experiencing many defeats, pressing forward courageously. Su Hualong's lifeless eyes moved slightly before falling silent again. Elder Yaori knew that his words should have had some effect. However, Su Hualong still needed to think things through on his own in order to truly break free from the shadow. That would take some time. Elder, I just remembered something, Su Qilai suddenly said. More than a month ago, when senior brother Hualong came to sweep through the outer sect of the Green Edge Sword Sect, he was defeated by Chu-Mu. At that time, Chu-Mu seemed to be returning from the 100 Beast Valley. At that time, senior brother Li He and the others were in the 100 Beast Valley. What are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that Li He's death is related to this Chu-Mu? Elder Luminous Sun glanced at Su Qilai, giving him a fright. He hurriedly replied, Elder, I think it's possible. Idiot, what's the use of saying it now? Elder Luminous Sun rebuked angrily, giving Su Qilai a big fright. Chu-Mu's attainments in swordsmanship are too terrifying. This kind of person cannot be allowed to grow. Elder Yaori looked into the distance and narrowed his eyes as if he was deep in thought. He said to himself, there wasn't a suitable opportunity to make a move just now. Once we return to the Sword Sect, we must make the necessary arrangements. The moment Chu-Mu leaves the Green Edge Sword Sect, we must immediately kill him and eliminate any future troubles. Senior brother, you're back. Seeing Chu-Mu, Li Wei's big eyes fluttered in surprise. She looked very happy. I've already prepared the dishes. Good, thank you for your hard work. Chu-Mu smiled and walked up to the second floor. Li Wei hurriedly carried the dishes up to the second floor. After chatting for a while, Li Wei returned to the first floor. Chu-Mu focused on enjoying the food and drinking a small cup of wine. He temporarily forgot about everything else and only used the tip of his tongue to feel the world. Little Wei, I plan to go into seclusion for a period of time. It will probably take 10 days to half a month. During this time, I'll have to trouble you. Don't let anyone disturb me. Chu Mu said while Li Wei was cleaning up the dishes. Yes, senior brother. Li Wei immediately replied and looked at Chu Mu curiously. Senior brother, are you going to make a breakthrough in your cultivation? Yes. Chu Mu nodded and didn't say much. Although Li Wei was so curious that her heart was like a cat's paw, she still didn't ask. After cleaning up, she went down the stairs. Tomorrow, I'll refine the Qi refining pill and truly reach the peak of stage 7. After that, I'll use about 5 days to consolidate my cultivation and about 10 days to make a breakthrough. Chu Mu had a more detailed plan in his heart. Now I'll comprehend the sword force. After returning from the sword battle arena for a month, Chu Mu cultivated to comprehend the sword force. In Chu Mu's mind, he constantly recalled the pressure of Wenren Yun's aura and the powerful aura of Elder Yao Ri and Elder Lin. At this moment, Li Wei just happened to walk up to the second floor. Her petite body unconsciously trembled, and she was greatly alarmed. She only felt that, although the Chu Mu in front of her was silently sitting, there was an extremely peculiar and powerful aura emanating from him. Straight as a sword, sharp as a sword, tenacious as a sword, indomitable as a sword, his figure became infinitely tall. Senior brother Chu, what are you cultivating? Li Wei couldn't control her body and trembled slightly. Even her hands and feet were weak, and she almost knelt down and almost suffocated. Her small face was pale and blue. She quickly retreated down the stairs and stepped back to the first floor. Only then did she gasp for breath and leaned against the wall. Unknowingly, Chu Mu had already comprehended a little of the sword force. Qinglan's sword sect is getting more and more arrogant. The Lingfeng Palm Academy secretly muttered. There was a strange light in their eyes. Well, this time, if it weren't for the appearance of Chu Mu, I'm afraid that our 3 academies would have been swept away. Our reputation would be greatly damaged, and it would encourage the arrogance of Qinglan's sword sect. Elder Lin said in a deep voice. When he talked about Chu Mu, his face was full of satisfaction. Immediately there was some regret. It was a pity that such a genius couldn't be accepted as a disciple. Moreover, Yao Ri, that shameless thing, even brazenly poached Chu Mu and threatened to cultivate Chu Mu into a Qi transformation realm expert within 5 years. Elder Lin thought of this and felt indignant. Master, in my opinion, we might as well take out a portion of the elixirs and give it to Chu Mu so that Chu Mu's cultivation can improve as soon as possible. Although a truly powerful swordsman needs some external help, this kind of external help still has to be earned by oneself. The Lingfeng Palm Academy said calmly. Except for him, no one else knew that Chu Mu had already comprehended the concept of wind. No one knew how much importance he attached to Chu Mu. It was not that the Lingfeng Palm Academy wanted those elixirs. The most important thing was that the Lingfeng Palm Academy hoped that Chu Mu could obtain them through his own ability. This was the path that every excellent swordsman had to go through. Yes, Chu Mu's current cultivation is at the late 7th stage. It is said that he has been guarding the arena for a month. There should be one last Qi refining pill left. After consuming it, he can reach the peak of the 7th stage. Elder Lin nodded and said, next, he should first consolidate his cultivation and then break through to the 8th stage. Yes, once he breaks through to the 8th stage, with his attainments in swordsmanship, he will be able to defeat the early 9th stage. He will be able to contend against the middle 9th stage or even the late 9th stage. He will already be qualified to participate in the Qingfeng sword battle in a few months. The Lingfeng Palm Academy nodded with a look of anticipation on his face. That's right. The 3 inner courts have never shown their talents in the Qingfeng sword battle. This time, it's all up to Chu Mu. Elder Lin's eyes shone with incomparable hope and anticipation. In the blink of an eye, 5 days had passed. I have completely consolidated my sword qi cultivation at the peak of the 7th stage. The side effects of consuming the elixir have basically been eliminated. It's time to break through to the 8th stage. Sitting on the balcony, facing the rising sun, Chu Mu exhaled a mouthful of white air that shot out a few meters like a sword. On the 6th day, the peak of the 7th stage sword chi circulated through his body and began to rush into a brand new meridian, opening it up bit by bit. After opening up this meridian, his sword chi cultivation would also be able to break through to the 8th stage. On the 7th day, a third of the meridian had been opened. On the 8th day, half of the meridian had been opened. On the 9th day, 3/5 of the meridian had been opened. On the 10th day, on the 11th day, every day, the efficiency of opening up the meridian became lower and lower, and the difficulty became higher and higher. Chu Mu closed his eyes tightly, focused and focused. He didn't have any other thoughts in his mind. He could only continuously control the sword chi, attack, disperse, and attack again. This cycle repeated. 12th day, 13th day, 14th day, 15th day, there's only a little bit of blockage left. Let's break through this final obstacle in one go. Chu Mu circulated the sword chi 3 times, and after accumulating the energy, it was like a flood breaking through a mountain, or like a thunderbolt tearing through the sky. Chu Mu could feel that this meridian was faintly aching under the impact of the powerful sword chi. Break. Like a thunderous explosion, Chu Mu only felt an incomparable pain, as if his meridians were about to explode. In the next second, he was drowned by a tide-like pleasure. The sword aura's transportation speed involuntarily increased, washing over him and letting out the sound of a rolling river. The 8th stage of sword chi was achieved. Book ID equals 250-8771, book name equals The Ultimate Villain. Chapter 57. It was still the darkness before dawn, and the chill was even colder than before. The grass and trees behind the rocks by the pond were covered in a thin layer of frost. It was already the beginning of winter. The air was very fresh, and there was a trace of coldness. Chu Mu took a deep breath, and the coldness entered his lungs from his nostrils. His spirit was lifted, and he was very clear-headed. Walking to the balcony, he stretched his muscles and sat down cross-legged. Chu Mu began a new day of training. Zhongyuan's sword chi manual. The sword chi moved, and immediately, it flowed through his meridians like a river. It was much better than yesterday. The sword chi of the 8th stage of the sword chi realm was twice as much as that of the 7th stage, and it was twice as pure. Most importantly, the 8th stage of the sword chi realm could release sword chi 10 meters away. In addition, the Zhongyuan sword chi manual had reached the 4th level. After completing 24 cycles, Chu Mu's cultivation stabilized once more. He casually pointed a finger, and with a sharp whoosh, a ray of white sword chi shot through the air. In the blink of an eye, it traveled 10 meters before dissipating. The release of sword chi from the 8th stage is similar to external sword chi. In the future, I can mix external sword chi into it, making it difficult for others to detect. Chu Mu muttered to himself, after I finish the 2nd level of the sword chi protective secret technique, I'll practice my sword arts first, and consolidate my sword chi cultivation for a few days before continuing to the arena. After a month of hard training, Chu Mu's external sword chi range had reached 4 meters, and the sword chi protective secret technique was even more effective. Under Chu Mu's control, the external sword chi quickly flowed on his skin like an invisible stream. It was refined over and over again, making the invisible sword chi protective secret technique stronger and stronger. As he trained, the external sword chi suddenly sped up uncontrollably. After a few cycles, it paused and naturally dissipated. I've finished the 2nd level? Chu Mu was a little surprised. He carefully sensed that he had indeed finished the 2nd level of the sword chi protective secret technique. Good, my 1 month of hard work was not in vain. I finally succeeded. Chu Mu's lips curled into a smile. The 1st layer can block the sharpness of a fine steel sword. The 2nd layer can block the sharpness of a 100-tempered sword. Let me try. Drawing his sword, Chu Mu gently cut his arm. He only felt that it was a little obscure. There seemed to be a thin white mark where he cut, but it quickly disappeared. All right, the second level can block the attack of the 100 refined sword. Let me see if I can block the release of the 8th phase sword chi. As he spoke, a thin strand of sword chi emerged from Chu Mu's finger and shot towards his arm. With a poochie sound, the sword chi dissipated and his arm was unharmed. However, Chu Mu could clearly feel that the protective sword chi in the area that was hit by the sword chi instantly collapsed, but very quickly, the surrounding sword chi was absorbed and replenished. It's a pity that there are no cultivation techniques for the future. Chu Mu thought to himself, and felt a little regretful. Although with my attainments in swordsmanship and movement techniques, I usually won't be attacked by the enemy, but sometimes I can still play a huge role. As the sun rose, a touch of dark red fell on the pond, creating a multicolored light. Chu Mu carried his sword downstairs and found that Li Wei had woken up surprisingly early to practice her sword. "Good morning, senior brother." Li Wei's small face was covered in sweat, sparkling under the morning sun. When she saw Chu Mu, she immediately withdrew her sword and greeted him. Facing the morning sun, this kind of vitality and freshness made Chu Mu's eyes light up. He revealed a smile from the bottom of his heart and nodded. After giving Li Wei a few pointers, Chu Mu came to the Ling Feng Sword Discourse Arena and discovered that he was not the first one. On the Sword Discourse Arena, there were already more than 30 disciples practicing their swordsmanship, and there were still people rushing over. Although it was a little later than usual, it also meant that the atmosphere of the disciples of the Soaring Wind Courtyard was very good. "Good morning, Senior Brother Chu." When these disciples saw Chu Mu walking over, they immediately stopped practicing. As if they had rehearsed, they all saluted to Chu Mu and shouted loudly, giving Chu Mu a fright. "Good morning, everyone." Chu Mu returned the sword salute. Senior Brother Chu is really elegant. He is not arrogant at all just because his swordsmanship is brilliant. That's right, some people, if their swordsmanship is a little stronger, their nostrils will be raised to the sky. No matter how strong this kind of person is, they can't compare to Senior Brother Chu. If it was said that Chu Mu in the past was someone who made people revere his swordsmanship, then the current Chu Mu was someone who made people respect him even more. Not long after practicing the sword, a deacon came to the Sword Discourse Arena and told Chu Mu that the sect leader had invited him. Why is the sect leader looking for Senior Brother Chu? Maybe he has taken a fancy to Senior Brother Chu's talent and wants to take him in as his disciple. I don't know, but I feel that it's definitely not a bad thing. Not bad, your sword chi cultivation has reached the 8th stage. Seeing Chu Mu, a hint of green flashed across the Soaring Wind Academy's eyes. He clapped his hands and laughed. What about the concept of wind? Has it improved? 20%. Chu Mu said after saluting with his sword. 20%. The sect leader was shocked at first, but then his eyes lit up. His gaze was as if he was looking at a rare treasure. His gaze was so sharp that it seemed as if he could see through Chu Mu, causing Chu Mu's scalp to go numb. Good, good, good. In less than 10 years, your comprehension of the concept of wind will surpass mine. The sect leader's tone was already somewhat excited. 20% of the concept of wind. Chu Mu was only 16 years old. What was he doing when he was 16? The sect leader couldn't help but think back. When he was 16 years old, he seemed to be a disciple of the Soaring Wind Academy who had just entered the 8th stage. He didn't know anything about the concept of wind. For a moment, the sect leader felt a little ashamed. When they were both 16 years old, why was the difference so big? Furthermore, although the sect leader had recommended Chu Mu to go to the Fierce Wind Cliff to comprehend the concept, it was only a possibility. Because the environment of the Fierce Wind Cliff was constantly changing, it was indeed more suitable for the comprehension of the concept of wind, but it wasn't absolute. Furthermore, even if it was possible, it would take a long time. The sect leader had estimated that Chu Mu would have to stay at the fierce wind cliff for at least a year before he could make any progress in the concept of wind. As for reaching 20% from 10%, it would probably take 2 to 3 years. This was already a relatively fast estimate, but he didn't expect that in just a little over a month, Chu Mu had been punished by the fierce wind cliff to reflect on his mistakes for 7 days. In 7 days, his comprehension of the concept of wind had increased by 10%? Was he still human? Thinking about it, the sect leader's expression kept changing. He was absent-minded until Chu Mu lightly coughed and woke up. "Oh right, I called you here this time because there's a letter from your family." Only then did the sect leader remember the important matter and quickly came back to his senses. A letter appeared in his hand and he handed it to Chu Mu. A letter from home? Chu Mu was a bit surprised. After taking it over, he saw that it was from Mizar City's Chu family. The sender was Chu Xingyun, Chu Mu's father. "It's probably because we haven't seen each other for a long time and your parents miss you. Open it and take a look," the sect leader said indifferently. There was a trace of nostalgia in his eyes, as if he was reminiscing. Chu Mu nodded and opened the letter to read. The general content was, "I miss my son," and so on. It also said that soon, it would be the 70th birthday of the Chu family's old patriarch, Chu Mu's grandfather. He hoped that Chu Mu could make a trip home. At that time, Chu Mu's big brother, Chu Tian, would also return home. Home? Chu Mu pondered for a moment. In the end, he decided to make a trip home. Firstly, his current identity was that of a disciple of the Chu family of Kaiyang City of the Great Kuan dynasty. In his memories, this grandfather of his treated him quite well. Secondly, it could be considered a training trip. When he returned, his early 8th phase sword chi would be completely consolidated. At that time, he would be able to enter the sword battle arena again. "Sect leader, I plan to make a trip home," Chu Mu said. "Yes, a swordsman cultivates without emotions. Family is also an indispensable part." The sect leader seemed to be implying something. "You can go home, but you must remember that you must return within 3 months. At that time, it will be the triennial Qingfeng sword battle arena. In the past, the 3 inner courtyards were just going through the motions. But this time, because of you, I believe that the sect leader will be able to obtain a better ranking. Moreover, if you enter the top 3, you will receive an extremely good reward. Even I am tempted. If you miss it, it will be a pity." Chu Mu nodded and pondered. He left the place and returned to the pavilion. After making some preparations, he left the Azure Edge Sword sect. Book ID equals 241-1809. Book name equals Martial Enemy of the World. Chapter 58. At the foot of Qinglan Mountain, there was a small town called Qinglan Town. Qinglan Town was the only town at the foot of Qinglan Mountain. Almost everyone who went in and out of Qinglan Mountain had to pass through it. Over time, Qinglan Town became lively and crowded. Chu Mu brought some dry food and water down Qinglan Mountain. When he arrived at Qinglan Town, it was already past noon. He found a small shop and had a bowl of beef noodles. After a short rest, he left Qinglan Town and headed in the direction of Kaiyang City. Kaiyang City was not particularly far from Qinglan Town. As long as he walked along the road, he would be able to reach it in about 2 days. Chu Mu did not use any means of transportation. Walking was also a kind of practice. Besides, his grandfather's birthday was in a few days. There was still time. What Chu Mu did not know was that since he entered Qinglan Town, pairs of eyes were secretly watching him and spreading the news to each other. Shortly after Chu Mu left Qinglan Town, some people also left with swords. The sun was setting in the west and the sunset dyed half the sky red. Chu Mu was already quite far away from Qinglan Town. Tonight, he would have to sleep in the wild. Unknowingly, the sky was dark. Chu Mu walked to the side of the road. There were a few stones. He planned to stay here for the night and continue his journey in the morning. Eating jerky and drinking water, Chu Mu's movements paused. Looking back at the path he came from, 3 figures appeared. They sped up and leapt over. This let Chu Mu know that they were coming for him. Hee, I finally caught up. The 3 men spread out to form a triangle and surrounded Chu Mu. One of them was a strong middle-aged man. In the early winter, he was only wearing a short-sleeved shirt. His muscles bulged like rocks, and he carried a sword on his back. The other was a short middle-aged man with a pointed mouth and monkey cheek. He had triangular eyes and looked very sinister. 2 short swords hung from his waist. The third person looked very ordinary. He was a middle-aged man without any protrusions. He was expressionless and carried a very ordinary sword. However, it was him that made Chu Mu feel a trace of danger. What business do the 3 of you have? Chu Mu wordlessly put down the jerky and glanced at the 100 refinement sword to the side as he spoke indifferently. His aura observing art could not see through their cultivation, which meant that their sword chi cultivation was above Chu Mu's. Nothing serious. The brawny man grinned, revealing a mouthful of big yellow teeth. His eyes flashed with a strange light. I just want to borrow something from you. What is it? Chu Mu followed the other party's words and suddenly threw the jerky to the ordinary-looking middle-aged man. He grabbed the 100 refined sword and unsheathed it with a clang. The snow-white sword light illuminated the darkness like lightning. This sword, with an incomparably swift and fierce posture, pierced towards the brawny man like a fierce wind. Borrow your. Before the last 2 words came out, the brawny man was shocked by Chu Mu's actions. It was completely unexpected. The sword light was so dazzling that he subconsciously narrowed his eyes. At the same time, he fiercely stomped on the ground and quickly retreated, holding the sword hilt with a backhand grip. Unsheathing and slashing down, the big sword could split mountains and split rock. The strong wind whistled and a strong pressure rolled. In an instant, this brawny man's rich battle experience and adaptability were displayed. At the same time, the ordinary-looking middle-aged man unsheathed his sword. The sword was extremely fast. It drew an arc and cut open the jerky. A light green sword chi shot through the air towards Chu Mu. The short middle-aged man crossed his hands and pulled out his short sword. He was almost close to the ground. He was silent and fast. The short sword was sharp and flashed with a cold and sharp light. It stabbed towards Chu Mu's feet. Top, middle, and bottom. The 3 sides cooperated skillfully and the power was shocking. However, Chu Mu used wind travel and his body seemed to float in the air, as if he was weightless. The 100 refined sword lightly knocked against the large sword, causing the sword to vibrate and knock the large sword away. His body borrowed the force to shift to the side, drawing an arc and dodging the sword aura and the short middle-aged man's attack. Turning around like a swallow flying back, the sword cut horizontally. It was extremely beautiful and full of killing intent. The brawny man's eyes were filled with shock. He desperately wanted to dodge, but he was still a bit too slow. With a swoosh, Chu Mu's sword cut through the brawny man's neck. Blood spurted out like a fountain. Taking advantage of the momentum, Chu Mu's body was light as a feather. His sword was like the wind, stabbing towards the short middle-aged man. The speed was too fast. The short middle-aged man's face was filled with shock. He hurriedly waved his 2 short swords and desperately retreated. The ordinary-looking middle-aged man was shocked. He used his killer move. The sky was filled with sword shadows like a fierce wind, completely enveloping Chu Mu. Intermediate sword art. Hurricane sword art's killer move, Hurricane Kill. Chu Mu changed his sword style and used the dazzling breeze. Under the 20% wind mentality, the power of the dazzling breeze was not inferior to a normal intermediate killer move. The cold killing intent and the sword shadows clashed and cancelled each other out. Chu Mu's left hand pointed forward. The sword chi cut through the air and attacked the short middle-aged man. Damn it! How is this a new inner disciple of the sword faction? The short middle-aged man cursed. He waved his short sword continuously, blocking Chu Mu's sword chi and counterattacking. He held his two swords and stabbed out in a cross. His body rose into the air and spun at high speed. He rushed towards Chu Mu like an electric drill. Around him, the air was torn into pieces. It was extremely sharp, and dust was flying everywhere. The air flow intensified. Chu Mu's right foot tapped on his left foot and used his wind travel body art. He followed the air flow and floated to the side. Cloud's mentality, shocking cloud kill. This guy is so hard to deal with. The ordinary-looking middle-aged man's face changed. He used his killer move again, hurricane kill. As the killing moves collided, sword chi crisscrossed and sliced through the air, creating a sizzling sound that caused one's scalp to go numb. Chu Mu took the opportunity to retreat and avoid the violent wind kill. Hurricane kill. Under the 20% wind mentality, the power of the hurricane kill increased by several times. The 1-meter-long light blue wind blade followed Chu Mu's attack and flew towards the short middle-aged man. No! The short middle-aged man panicked. He waved his two swords again and again. The sword chi surrounded him and tried to block the wind blade. With a poochie sound, the sword chi was shattered and the two swords were blown away. The wind blade chopped off the short middle-aged man's two forearms and finally landed on his neck. His head flew up into the air. The wound was squirming and blood was gushing out like a fountain. The short middle-aged man was scared out of his wits. He released two sword chi and attacked Chu Mu. Meanwhile, he retreated and ran for his life, trying to escape. Since you are here, then go down and accompany your companions. Chu Mu's eyes were filled with killing intent. He shouted and used his wind travel with all his strength. He avoided the sword chi and shot out like a gust of wind. The killing intent behind him made the middle-aged man pale. His face was full of shock and fear. He had never thought that the guy he thought was his prey would turn into a hunter and kill two of his companions in such a short time. This kind of strength was not something he could mess with. Gritting his teeth, the middle-aged man poured sword chi into his feet and used his movement art to run away. However, Chu Mu's movement art was better and faster. He quickly closed the distance. Sword chi shot out, and the middle-aged man had no time to dodge at all. He only felt a pain in his calf, and blood spurted out, almost causing him to fall forward. So, a figure flashed past him, and a cold sensation spread from his neck. A sword was placed on his neck. The middle-aged man's face was full of fear. His eyes were full of shock. His face was pale and his lips were trembling. "Why do you want to kill me?" Staring into the middle-aged man's eyes, Chu Mu's voice was as cold as the northern wind in the middle of winter. "Speak." "I said you can't kill me." The middle-aged man endured the pain in his calf and trembled. "If you don't speak, I will make 360 cuts on your body and let you slowly experience the feeling of death." Chu Mu's voice was even colder. The middle-aged man seemed to be imagining that scene. His face was even paler and he could not help but tremble. It's Qinglan. Qinglan sword sect. They asked us to kill a new inner disciple of the Qingfeng sword sect. They even had a portrait. The middle-aged man was almost crying. This Qinglan sword sect was 2F** King deceitful. Qinglan sword sect. Chu Mu hesitated for a moment. You can't kill me. The middle-aged man seemed to have sensed Chu Mu's killing intent, but before he could finish speaking, Chu Mu's sword had already pierced his throat, causing his eyes to widen with boundless unwillingness. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fell limply to the ground.